Chapter 457. In order to calm the uneasiness of the nobles, Roland specially arranged a sumptuous banquet. A long table covered with a white cloth was placed in the center of the hall. The nobles who came sat facing each other, and in the middle were all kinds of dishes, wine, and flowers. After 2 glasses of red wine, the atmosphere was much more relaxed. Moreover, the major nobles had all fallen, and the honeysuckle and the elks were on Roland's side. The remaining minor nobles were even less likely to jump out at such a time. Instead, they expressed their intention to join Roland's side. In this situation, Roland knew it was time to put his new order on the table. After eating and drinking, he distributed the small booklets that he had prepared in advance to the nobles. It was the publicity album that he had carefully prepared. "Your Highness. What is this?" As expected, soon a noble asked in surprise, "Why are the paintings so realistic?" "Yes, they're almost real. They don't look like paintings. No paint can express such delicate colors." As expected of the nobles in the big city, it was obvious that these people had a certain appreciation for paintings. Roland clapped his hands and smiled. They are indeed painted by a painter, but if there's anything different, it's that the painter is a witch, and the paint she used is omnipresent magic. These words made the nobles stiffen, and they did not know whether to put down the booklets in their hands or not. The power of the local church has disappeared. "What are you worried about?" The prince raised his eyebrows. "Witches are no different from us. I've verified this many times." Ahem, ahem. Perrault almost choked. "You're right, Your Highness." As expected of Prince Roland, ha ha ha. The other nobles also laughed awkwardly. It seems that I've said something quite ambiguous." Roland pretended to be nonchalant and changed the topic. After more than a year as a prince, he found that his level of calmness, or rather, the thickness of his skin had increased by leaps and bounds. The pictures are just to make the content more vivid. The main point is the story. They continued to read a few more pages. Aurelia, the little girl from the elk family, quickly raised her head and asked, "Is this the family history of a noble?" "Aurelia." Ren reminded her in a low voice, "Call him His Highness." "Yes, he used to be a noble of the western region." Roland made an okay gesture. "Some of you should remember him." "Your Highness." "I know him," a knight said. "Sir Pine, he is my neighbor. Our territories used to be next to each other." "I've seen him too," another man recalled. "I think he was a baron. His father was Joey Cole's vassal. Ever since Lord Joey left the western region, his territory has declined." "Viscount Tigu is currently in Border Town," Roland said with a smile, "and this album is a record of how I got to know him, as well as what happened afterwards. As you can see, he is a noble living under the new system. He is currently busy practicing his flintlock. It is estimated that after the end of the months of demons, he will take his daughter and attendants to the misty forest to enjoy the fun of hunting. As far as I know, since he sold the territory east of Stronghold and settled down in Border Town, not only has his title been promoted, but his family property has also increased several times." Fear came from the unknown, and so did resistance to the change of the system, because they did not know what kind of impact the change would have on them. Roland asked Soroya to depict the life of Pine in a small town in the form of a comic, as an example for his own propaganda, in order to reduce the resistance and fear of the nobles. Compared to those dry and boring biographies, the expression of a comic was obviously more vivid. "You should all know that I am about to build a city in the western region. In fact, I have been preparing this plan for a long time. When the time comes, Border Town, Longsong Stronghold, and the long and narrow land between the two places will be integrated into one." Roland continued, "Some people will ask, how can the two towns be connected to each other when they are so far away from each other? First of all, the overall meaning refers to the administrative, that is to say, the new city will implement the same law, the same policy. This is also the reason why I want to take back the nobles' enfeoffment and lawmaking rights." "Your Highness, then our territory?" someone asked. It will still belong to you, he interrupted. I said, taking back these rights doesn't mean that you will lose anything. The essence of enfeoffment is to hand over your territory to others to form your own inferior nobles. In this way, you can strengthen your own power, resist the enemy together, or fight together to seize benefits. Under the new system, the task of resisting foreign enemies will be completed by a professional army. As long as you do things according to the rules, you will earn far more than in the past. After all, compared to dividing a little cake, it is better to make the cake bigger. Seeing that everyone was silent, Roland smiled and said, "You have never been to Border Town, so it is normal that you don't know how big the cake can be." In fact, in the second half of the year, the town's financial revenue reached as much as 30,000 golden dragons. If it were not for the early arrival of the months of the demons, this number is likely to increase by about 10,000. The nobles all gasped, 30,000? Roland had already learned from Perrault about the financial situation of Stronghold over the years. The annual income of City Hall was no more than this amount, not to mention these small nobles. 100 golden dragons was a huge sum of money for them. And as the future managers of all industries here, you will naturally get rich returns from it. He raised the corner of his mouth, back to the construction of the city. In addition to the administrative unification, in terms of geography, the two towns will gradually move closer. For example, it only took me 1 day to go from Border Town to Longsong Stronghold. When the construction of Kingdom Avenue is completed, the time on land will also be reduced to 1 day. If you ride a horse or a bicycle, it will only take you half a day, not to mention faster transportation. What is a bicycle? Aurelia asked curiously. A human-powered riding tool that runs very fast on flat ground, the prince said with a smile. I dare say that in 3 years, we will be able to have breakfast in Stronghold and then go to Border Town to work. Because the Kingdom Avenue was a straight line, the distance between the two places was shortened to 60 kilometers, which would only take half an hour by rail or car. However, most of the nobles did not pay attention to this. The knight, who claimed to be Sir Pine's neighbor, asked cautiously, Your Highness, what you just said, do you want us to manage Stronghold? Yes and no, Roland said with a smile. As I said before, after the construction of the city, the two places will be administratively integrated. Stronghold will be transformed into a district of the city, under the jurisdiction of the central city hall. But for now, a day's journey is still too long, so I will set up a subordinate city hall in Longsong district, which will be divided into many subordinate departments according to the current model of Border Town. You will work in these departments and be responsible for the specific matters here. Subordinate departments? The nobles looked confused. Chapter 458. After explaining the administrative integration plan, Roland picked up his teacup and slowly took a few sips, waiting for everyone to digest it. A large number of people were needed to maintain the daily operation of an area. Before the literacy rate was raised, it was inevitable to pull in the nobles. After all, most of them had received primary education and were slightly involved in management. If there were outstanding people, he did not mind sending them out to manage a city, or even a territory, similar to the mayors and governors of later generations. After a few minutes, Roland began to explain the next problem. That was to fight crime. In his New Order concept, there was no place for black street organizations in the city, and everyone could find a job that could support them without robbing others. If it was a highly developed modern city, he was not sure that he could do this, because the population of tens of millions of people and the saturation of low-level positions would lead to a large number of unemployed people. But in the western region, including Longsong Stronghold and the entire suburban territory, there were only 60 to 70,000 people, and the infrastructure was still a blank. As long as they were willing to work, there was no need to worry about not having a job. How much do you know about the rats? Do you mean, the black street rats? Ren Med coughed twice. I have dealt with them. What kind of dealings? Roland asked with interest. This. Ren seemed a little embarrassed. I used to be the leader of the Inferno gang, and I competed with several other rat gangs for territory. Several people on the scene could not help but burst out laughing. Roland was also surprised for a moment. A second son of the Count was actually a rat. And the Inferno gang, this name was too unstylish. He began to doubt whether this person was really the son of Count Med. Your Highness, the truth is, Perrault explained. A few years ago, the Blackstreet forces in the dock area were very rampant. Almost every day, civilians and foreign merchants were killed, but the patrols turned a blind eye. Sir Ren could not stand it anymore, so he took his guards to the refugee area to win over a group of people, and drove the rats out of the dock area. At that time, he also wrote letters about the daily battle and sent them to me, who was far away in King's City. In his letter, he said that this was a great battle, no less than the battle against the demonic beasts, so I think. Perrault, stop it, Ren said shyly. I was just bored at the time, so I was looking for some fun to kill time. So that's how it is. This is probably a feat done by a noble who was passionate about the game of knight during his middle school years. Roland thought. For the second son of the Elk, who loved fighting since childhood, there was nothing more exciting than having a group of subordinates behind him. Although it was not like commanding an army of thousands of men and horses, when two groups of people fought, it was not bad at all. What about this gang now? I don't know. Ren scratched the back of his head. Ever since I joined the Hermes defense line to fight against the real demonic beasts, I haven't contacted that group of people. Roland nodded. In fact, I intend to eradicate all the rats in Stronghold, so that every civilian can live a stable life. Your Highness, with all due respect, Ren said hesitantly, I'm afraid. I can't do that. Why? He frowned. I have the first army. Are the rats more difficult to deal with than the noble knight? That's not the case. Roland seemed to be choosing his words carefully. They are weak and timid, lack weapons and armor, and don't know how to fight in a battle formation. They can't even withstand a single blow from the knight, but, if you deal with them according to the way you deal with rebels, whether they were rats or not, I'm afraid that there will be only a few civilians left in Stronghold. You mean, rats and civilians are constantly changing, Your Highness, Ren replied respectfully. When the harvest is bad and the months of demons are long, many civilians have to do what the rats do to survive. This is also the reason why most lords allow Blackstreet to exist. Compared to starving civilians, it's better to let them fight among themselves. Roland's face darkened. He did not expect the rats to appear in this way. What about their organizers? These people are habitual criminals. Some of them are supported by the local nobles, and some are exiled criminals from other places. Very well, I don't think any of you are raising rats. The prince glanced around the long table with a cold face, and the nobles all lowered their heads. But it doesn't matter if you are, as long as you cooperate with me in the cleanup operation from today onwards, I can let bygones be bygones. He paused and then looked at Renee. I have a task for you. Yes, Your Highness. In the next month, I will focus on cracking down on all crimes in Stronghold, and you need to cooperate with the First Army to eliminate the leaders of the gangs in Blackstreet and completely disintegrate all the rats. As for the specific measures, I will arrange for someone to inform you. Your Highness, what about the members? Without the food provided by the organization, it will be difficult for them to survive the months of demons. Ren said worriedly, plus this year's months of demons came earlier, the number of these people may be more than in previous years. I will ask Perrault to open the warehouse and continue to provide food until the end of the months of demons. Your Highness, you can't do that. You will only make them worse if you feed them. That's right. I'm afraid everyone in the city will become beggars. Hearing this, the nobles all spoke up to stop him. Roland banged the table hard. I've decided. You don't have to say anything more. He felt that the biggest difference between himself and the nobles was that they always assumed the worst of the people, thinking that the people were lazy, ignorant, incompetent, despicable, greedy, and hopeless. But he was very clear about the power of the people. This group seemed stupid, but in fact, only by giving them the right guidance and setting an example could they become the backbone of this world. If the people were as useless as the nobles thought, how could they change the whole world again and again? In fact, spending energy on the people was the most worthwhile investment. Even the tiniest change could bring him amazing returns. Finally, we need to publicize the decree as soon as possible. Roland looked at Perrault. You have experience in this, so continue to expand it. If the people can't understand the notice, find someone to read it. The content is everything we talked about today. Everything? The latter was startled. Even the plan to clean up the rats. That's right, including the news of the opening of the warehouse. He looked around at the crowd again. Let me first teach you a prerequisite for a qualified city hall operation, which is to inform the people of the policy in advance, answer their questions, and listen to their feedback. In this way, the policy will not become a piece of paper. Chapter 459. In fact, you don't have to accompany me. Echo walked along the Redwater River, the snow under her feet making squeaking sounds. The city isn't safe, this isn't border town. Iron Axe walked behind her, keeping a distance of 2 steps. Moreover, His Highness told me that if you leave the castle and there aren't any other witches around, I should protect you. If I had known, I wouldn't have told him. She exhaled white air. Besides, you don't need to use honorifics with me. In my heart, you will always be the chief of the Osha clan, Lady Drow Silvermoon. At the mention of Osha, Echo fell silent. Although Iron Axe could not see her expression, he could feel that she was in low spirits. He wanted to say a few words of comfort, but he did not know where to start. In the end, he could only shut his mouth and silently followed her. Compared with the meandering Redwater River in the wild, this tributary almost became a straight line after entering the city. The embankments on both sides were paved with bricks, which were flat and tidy. Every 10 steps, there was a staircase leading to the river, probably for people to fetch water. Today's snow was not too heavy, so they occasionally met 1 or 2 pedestrians on the road. Whether they were men or women, they all looked at Echo in surprise. Obviously, Lady Silvermoon's tall figure and light brown skin were somewhat special, coupled with her long blue-gray hair, especially eye-catching. In the inland of Greycastle, it was rare to see a pure-blooded Sand Nation. Let's go to the other side. Echo obviously did not like being looked at like this. Yes. They found an arch bridge, carefully crossed the frozen bridge, and came to the east side of the stronghold. There were few houses here, and the farmland was covered with snow. At first glance, it was all flat land. The blue city wall in the distance was partly visible in the snow, forming a sharp contrast with the west side. I've never seen such a scene in Iron Sand City. Echo sighed. Before leaving the southernmost region, I thought the whole continent was the same. Except for sand, there was only sand, and water and oases were resources that had to be fought for with lives. But here, no one will bleed for the Redwater River. When you want to drink water, you just have to squat down. But they will bleed for other things, Iron Axe said in a low voice. The Golden Dragon, gems, honor, status, there is no escape from the struggle. Is that so? But Nightingale told me that she believes that Your Highness can stop disputes. She raised her head and looked at the gray sky. Whether it's the Sand Nation or the mainland kingdom, whether it's an ordinary person or a witch, they can all enjoy equal resources and live freely. This. I don't know. Iron Axe hesitated for a moment. He really couldn't imagine everyone putting aside their barriers and living together. Even someone like His Highness, who had mastered the power of God, might not be able to do so. He could undoubtedly conquer all his enemies, but could he make them willingly accept his rule? No matter what methods His Highness used, the seeds of hatred had been planted in the process of conquering them. Do you want to go back to Iron Sand City? Echo suddenly asked. No, Lady Silvermoon. Iron Axe came to his senses and replied without hesitation, I have sworn to the three gods that I will always serve His Highness Roland Wimbledon as my master and expand his territory. But you can rest assured that since he has promised to avenge you, he will certainly do so in the future. When you return to Iron Sand City, no one will dare to disrespect you. But I don't want to be the chief of the Osha clan, she whispered. I like to stay in places where the trees are evergreen, and I like to be with Vendi and Nightingale, and I like the songs His Highness taught me. I hope to go back one day, but I don't want to live in the desert and fight for water. Even so, in my heart, you are still the only successor of the Osha clan. Iron Axe didn't say what was in his heart, but bowed his head and said, no one can force you. The two walked through the white fields and came to an open area. Echo stopped and said, let's practice here, we shouldn't disturb others. Iron Axe knew that Echo's ability was to make all kinds of sounds. She usually practiced in the back garden of the castle in Border Town. This time, in order to avoid disturbing the important meeting between His Highness and the nobles, she deliberately came here to use her ability. He nodded and took 2 steps back. I'll be on guard for you. By the way, I wrote a song for my hometown. Echo turned around. Do you want to listen to it? A song? Iron Axe was slightly surprised. Yes, I used the arrangement method that Your Highness taught me to mix the sounds of various instruments together to make the melody more layered. Speaking of this, Huayin's expression was clearly much more relaxed. After trying it, I realized that a song can actually be so pleasant to listen to. Every addition of a different timbre will give it a completely different feeling. I don't know where Your Highness learned these methods from. When I was sold to King's City, I never heard any nobles talk about it. His Highness Roland has always been different. He is the god's favorite, Iron Axe thought. Yes, there has never been a person who treats the witches as sincerely as he does, Echo said with deep sympathy. But the names that His Royal Highness gave to those mixed methods are too strange. It's as if they were completely unrelated things together, such as electronic music, agricultural heavy metal. She smiled and shook her head. I think that only he could come up with such names. Before Iron Axe had time to reply, the song had already started. When the mixed music flowed into his ears, he suddenly froze in place. This was such an incredible tune, like sand brushing across an oasis, or like orange fire leaping up from the ground. At that moment, Iron Axe felt that he had returned to the desert under the scorching sun. Is this an illusion? He looked down and found that the snow had disappeared. He didn't know when, but he was in an oasis. Looking out, the scorching sand covered his entire field of vision. The woman in front of him had her eyes slightly closed. The song echoed in the blue sky. Her feet were standing in a shallow water, and the ripples were slowly spreading. It was breathtakingly beautiful. Passing through the sand and dust following the traces of the oasis, your footprints are left in the sea of sand. Your silhouette is reflected in the clear spring. One day, the oasis will become a new desert and a new oasis will grow in the desert, but the only thing that will not change is the legend about you. One of these days he will walk in your footprints, looking for your silhouette before the dawn breaks, that tossing and turning silent moment. Chapter 460. When Roland heard Iron Axe's report, he wondered if there was something wrong with his ears for a moment. You said you saw a vast desert in Echo's song and brought back a grain of sand from the desert. If it was just an auditory hallucination, could it still be considered a song? I didn't bring it back, Your Highness. Iron Axe solemnly put the grain of sand on the desk. I was in a daze at that time and didn't even think to check if the scene was real. It seemed to have suddenly appeared in my hand. If I had to describe it, it should be the flying sand brought by the hot wind. Roland thought for a moment and asked, she only sang this one song? There were some other songs, but I couldn't listen to them at all, Iron Axe recalled. The scene was like a miracle. If it was before, I would have believed Lady Silvermoon even if she claimed to be the three gods' emissary. Your Highness, did her ability evolve? Iron Axe had followed Roland for more than a year, so he obviously had a certain understanding of witches. It should be, but it's also the first time I've encountered such a situation. Roland thought for a moment and decided to call Echo over to ask her personally. After Iron Axe left, Roland picked up the grain of sand and carefully looked at it. Is this a magic creation? I'm not sure, Nightingale said behind him. There are no traces of magic on it. No traces of magic did not mean that it was not an object created by magic. It was just that this kind of material existed in reality and did not need to be maintained by magic, nor would it be affected by the god's stone of retaliation. For example, Soroya's paintings. Echo soon came to the study. Nightingale immediately appeared beside Roland and smiled at her. Congratulations. Echo was startled. Me? Nightingale nodded. The magic in your body has condensed. Didn't you notice? Really? Echo said in surprise. Does this mean my ability has evolved? What does it look like? Roland thought to himself. A blue transparent crystal, as clear as water, replied Nightingale. Its magic power is equal to that of Maggie. It seemed that this evolution had nothing to do with the epiphany. Instead, it had unknowingly completed the condensation. After Roland told Echo about Iron Axe's experience in the illusion, she seemed very surprised. You said, he seemed to have returned to the southernmost region and was in the middle of the sea of sand? The word, as if, is worth considering, because when he returned from the desert, he had an extra grain of sand on him. Roland laughed. Although sand can be found everywhere, he wouldn't go as far as to dig through the snow and find a grain of sand in the mud to deceive me. He paused. What did you see at the time? Nothing. Hui Yin replied, a little embarrassed. I closed my eyes at that time and didn't notice the changes in my surroundings. Then show us now, Roland said, holding his chin with great interest. Use the song from your hometown that you created. Here? Yes, he affirmed. There's still an hour before dinner. It won't affect anyone else. I also want to hear a song that can make people feel immersed, added Nightingale excitedly. Well, all right. Hui Yin took a deep breath. Soon, a mixed sonata that did not belong to this era began to play. The sweet voice of a woman echoed in the study. At first, she was a little reserved, probably because she had never sung indoors before. But as the tune gradually reached its climax, she was completely immersed in the music. Roland seemed to have heard the sound of a hot wind blowing through the green forest. The temperature in the room seemed to have increased by a few degrees, and his nose also smelled of the sand being baked by the scorching sun. When the aftertaste slowly dissipated, Roland thought about it for a long time before he recovered from the music. There was no doubt that this was a lyrical song full of exotic flavor. For a tone-deaf person like him, there was no fault at all. However, he did not see the vast desert. He was still sitting in the study, and there was no trace of the oasis with the trickling stream. He looked at Nightingale, who shook her head. Obviously, she did not see the strange illusion either. Did the ability not work? Did you only write this song? Asked Roland. Yes. Hui Yin nodded. Then sing a few more songs I taught you. He thought for a moment and decided, let everyone come and listen. Soon, the study was full of witches. Even the 3 witches from Sleeping Island rushed over, although they still had a stack of cards in their hands. Hui Yin was a little nervous, but with Vendi's encouragement, she slowly regained her composure and sang all the songs, including the gorilla song. And without exception, these songs were warmly applauded by the witches. After asking about the feelings of the witches, Roland had a general judgment in his heart. That was, the degree to which one would be influenced by the song depended on the listener's subjective experience. Those who had the same experience as the atmosphere of the song would be more influenced. Based on the modern songs that Roland had taught the witches, everyone had the best response to the gorilla song. After thinking about it, it was only because the witches had seen the first army marching to the beat of the drums that they could better understand the meaning of the song. Iron Axe, who was a sand nation, could naturally strongly resonate with the music full of the southernmost region. However, for the time being, Roland could not know how deep this influence could reach. If the listener was completely immersed in it, would everything in the illusion become real? But in any case, Huayin's new abilities still made him look forward to it, such as encouraging the soldiers, calming the masses, and cooperating with future theatrical performances. The role of a person who could arouse the audience's emotions was immeasurable. In the afternoon of the next day, Roland summoned Vader from Border Town to his study. Your Highness. I'm here. Vader's teeth were chattering, obviously he had not recovered from the high-speed flight. Now, the only mode of transportation to and fro between the two places was Maggie Express. Of course, even if he was wrapped in a thick blanket, flying under the claws of a giant beast at 60 kilometers per hour against the cold wind was still not a comfortable experience. Good job. Roland patted the fat pigeon on his shoulder. Coo. The pigeon proudly raised its head. I called you here because I want you to assist the nobles of the Elk family in training a team. He looked at Vader. The situation here is different from Border Town. There are rats, refugees, and vicious criminals. It's somewhat similar to Valencia. Vader baked himself by the fireplace for a while and finally stopped trembling. You mean, you want me to form a patrol team? No, it's the police. Roland explained the crackdown plan. The First Army will lead the operation in the first half, but the security of Stronghold will still be maintained by the police. As a policeman, the most important thing is to protect the people. Treat the people as harmonious as the spring breeze, and treat criminals as merciless as thunder, Vader could not help but repeat. Chapter 461. As long as the months of demons did not end, the streets and alleys of Stronghold were always deserted. Even the ubiquitous rats would curl up and hide in their respective territories, sharing the food that had been saved in the autumn and waiting for new prey to appear when the weather returned. That was how it should have been. Damn it, why do I have to go through the wind and snow to listen to the policy speech? Snaketooth spat on the ground angrily. It's none of our business what the big bosses are going to do. Pull up your collar. He looked at Joe, who was shivering beside him. If you get the cold plague, you'll die. He shouldn't have come out with us. Sunflower frowned. Why do we need 4 people to get information? Kanas is targeting us. Save it. So what if he's targeting us? Tiger Claw, who was the strongest among them, said disapprovingly. He's our food source. Although he said so, he still quickened his pace and stood in front of the other 3. Snaketooth suddenly felt the cold wind lessen. Thank you, Joe whispered. But when it came to Kanas, everyone was a little discouraged. There were different levels among the rats, from the king at the top to the tail at the bottom. They occupied different areas. Kanas was neither a king nor a tail. He was the manager of the Endless Alley in the western district of the outer city. To be precise, he should be the waist, or the belly. But no matter who he was, Snaketooth and the others had to respectfully call him boss when they saw him. There were 6 managers like him in the western district. As for the boss, who was also the king of the western district, Snaketooth had never seen him. Kanas had several groups of rats under his command, and they were one of them. There was no doubt that the more powerful they were, the more favored they would be by the managers. Unfortunately, as street children in the alley, they were outnumbered. Even when they fought, their arms and legs were much thinner than their opponents, so they were naturally at a disadvantage. Of course, Tiger Claw was an exception. His figure did not seem to have grown by eating only half a piece of black bread a day. As for Brown Girl Sunflower's targeting, they were even more unlucky. A witch had appeared in the alley. Snaketooth had wanted to use her ability to exchange for some money, but he did not expect to meet a big shot from the Elk family. In the end, not only did he not earn much money, he even lost the witch. It was precisely because of this that Kanas was particularly angry with them. He felt that if they had handed the witches over to him earlier, it would have been better to sell them to the nobles or the church. He's just saying it, Snaketooth said disdainfully. Sell it to the church for 25 golden dragon. Where was he going to find those fake priests? The church was in ruins. The nobles wouldn't hand over the golden dragon to a rat. He wouldn't even be alive to get the money. Snaketooth is right, said Joe, trembling. If we really made him lose 25 golden dragon, he would have thrown our bodies into the Redwater River. Kanas would only dare to hand over the witches to the king of the Western District, and he has to be wary of the witch's unpredictable ability. He doesn't have a god's stone of retaliation, Snaketooth continued. That guy just doesn't like us. What do you mean by that? She's paper. She's one of us. Sunflower pinched Snaketooth hard. Do you still want to treat her as a commodity? She suddenly paused. Hey, you didn't sell her at that time, did you? I didn't. He shouted. I tried my best to protect her, but the other party was the Lord of the Castellan. I don't know if she's doing well in Border Town. Tigerclaw sighed. How good can she be? Sunflower snorted. What's the difference between being played by a prince and being played by a noble? Really? You make it sound good, but when you see the life of a noble, I'm afraid you'll be eager to be played by a great noble. Snaketooth twitched his mouth. When they arrived at the square of Stronghold, the four of them were surprised to find that there was a wooden platform and a bonfire. There were about 200 or 300 people around the platform, which was a rare sight on a snowy day. There's actually someone preaching here. Tigerclaw clicked his tongue. What kind of game do those nobles want to play? It's definitely not good news. Snaketooth shrugged. I guess they want to levy taxes. Or they want to hire able-bodied men. Didn't they have a fight before? Anyway, it's none of our business, Sunflower said. Let's finish listening and go back early. Joe, go to the bonfire and warm yourself up. Okay. Snaketooth walked around the crowd to the edge of the platform. The man standing on the platform was wearing a thick cotton-padded jacket, a woolen hood, and a pair of deerskin gloves. He felt warm just by looking at him. Compared with the dirty and old linen clothes he was wearing, it was like heaven and earth. It would be great if I could find a chance to snatch it. But he also knew that this was just his imagination. The elk pattern cloak behind the preacher indicated his identity. The attendants of the four noble families were not people a rat could afford to offend. Aren't you going to warm yourselves by the bonfire with Joe? I can listen to the preaching alone. Snaketooth looked at the other two. Really? Tigerclaw raised his eyebrows. Of course. I have a good memory. He pointed to his head. I can remember words, people, and grudges. Pfft, Lotus sneered. Look at you. Since you said so, I won't stand on ceremony. Let's go, big guy. But you have to give me more dinner. We'll see. I don't know if there will be any dinner today. She waved her hand. After the two left, Snaketooth patted his cold cheeks and turned his attention back to the wooden platform. The news was meaningless to the bottom rat tail, but in the eyes of Belly and King, it might be a chance to make a profit. Of course, even if they could get something, there was almost nothing left for the people below. Dear citizens, this is a joint announcement from His Highness Roland Wimbledon, Earl of Elk, Shalafi Hull, and Consul of Longsong Stronghold, Perot Hull. The speaker took a sip of hot ale and said loudly with a piece of parchment in his hand, City Hall of Stronghold has opened the market for grain purchase. Citizens who have extra grain at home can sell it at the market at any time. But please note that from next month, any act of selling grain privately will be regarded as a felony. Only City Hall has the right to buy and sell grain. Once you are arrested for selling grain privately, you will be severely punished. City Hall also welcomes any citizen's report. If the report is verified, you will be rewarded with 25 silver royals. Snaketooth opened his mouth wide in surprise. He did not expect to hear such shocking news as soon as he arrived. Those nobles actually wanted to ban the sale of grain. Moreover, the prices given by City Hall for buying and selling grain were very low. The early arrival of the months of demons had caused the price of grain in Stronghold to rise step by step, and now it was about 3 times the market price. Obviously, the price of grain would not fall as long as the heavy snow did not stop. According to the new price, no one would be willing to sell grain to City Hall at a low price. However much grain the other side sold, the nobles and merchants would be able to buy it. Didn't the prince and the castellan consider this problem? Chapter 462. However, Snaketooth did not expect that something even more unbelievable was yet to come. The speaker's next message made him unable to move his feet. 5 days later, in the second week of the first month of spring, City Hall will distribute relief rations in the square. Everyone will receive 2 portions of hot oatmeal, 1 for lunch and 1 for evening. Citizens, let's thank His Highness for his kindness. Hearing this, there was a sudden uproar in the crowd. Gosh, Gower didn't lie. There's really such a thing in the announcement. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm it. Did I hear that right? Oatmeal every day. You're coming too. Don't you have a lot of oatmeal and jerky? That's still 2 portions for free. The guardian didn't forbid me from receiving them. Didn't you hear what he said? Everyone. Sir. Someone suddenly asked loudly, is the oatmeal really free? When will it be distributed? This was also the question that most people were concerned about. The crowd immediately stopped talking and looked at the noble's attendant. The latter waited until the crowd's anticipation was met before he calmly said, that's right. The oatmeal is indeed free, and it will be distributed until the end of the months of demons. Go and tell more neighbors and friends about this news. His Highness' promise will definitely come true. Hundreds of people were instantly excited, but Snaketooth still could not believe his ears. What did it mean to provide food for free? They could temporarily get rid of the threat of Khanas and no longer have to worry about starving to death in the cold snow. No, not only them, but all the rats could easily obtain food. In this way, King and Belly would not be able to control their tails. Khanas would never sit back and watch this happen. What would he do? Send someone to disperse the crowd and disturb the porridge distribution, or bribe the City Hall officials to pour the oatmeal into the Redwater River? However, Snaketooth also noticed that the speaker repeatedly mentioned His Highness, which meant that the one requesting for relief rations this time was the legendary Prince Roland, not the Duke or the 5 families of the past. Would he let these rat kings do whatever they wanted, or was he really different from the other nobles? He did not want to trust any nobles. The scene where paper was cheated away was still vivid in his mind. But there was a voice in his heart that kept asking himself, what if it's true, what if it's true? Fortunately, this doubt did not last long, because the elk attendant on the stage had already begun to announce the next piece of news. He originally thought that these decrees were just new tricks that the lords came up with to torment the citizens, and that they had nothing to do with a homeless child like him. However, the first 2 pieces of news surprised him greatly, and the third piece of news pointed directly at the rats. Citizens, listen up, your good days are coming. The speaker first calmed the noisy crowd with a few words, and then said word by word, in 5 days, starting from the porridge day, His Royal Highness will launch a severe crackdown on crime in Longsong Stronghold, including the elimination of Black Street organizations, cracking down on theft and robbery, as well as all illegal activities that threaten the lives and property of the citizens. When the time comes, don't linger in Black Street, and don't go to taverns, casinos, or other places to avoid unnecessary harm. The order of Stronghold needs to be maintained by all citizens. Now the City Hall is recruiting people, including public security personnel and police officers. Now I'll explain the recruitment requirements in detail. Snaketooth was no longer in the mood to listen. He squeezed out of the crowd and quickly ran to the bonfire. Hurry, let's go back. Are you done? Sunflower rubbed her hands and said reluctantly, you should also warm yourself up before you go. No, let's go now. He said anxiously. What's the matter? Said Joe, sensing something was amiss. I'll explain it to you on the way. Snaketooth stamped his foot. We have to hurry back, or we'll be dead when Kanas hears the news from someone else. The gathering place of the western rats was located in a 2-story house deep in the endless alley. Kanas was a strong one-eyed man with a ferocious face. His temper and methods were as cruel as his face. Snaketooth had seen him nail one of his men to the wall and whip him to death after he messed up the job. In addition, he was in charge of the food supply of several rat groups on the street, so no one dared to disrespect him. Snaketooth was the same. He carefully knelt in front of Kanas and repeated the news he had heard. Lord Castellan wants to attack us. Kanas frowned. What's going on? Not Lord Castellan, Snaketooth cautiously reminded him. That man has been talking about His Highness. You know nothing. He spat. No matter how powerful a noble is, he can't do anything in someone else's territory. This is Longsong Stronghold, not Border Town or King's City. Without the approval of the Elk family, he can't do anything. So what if he's the nominal guardian of the western region? Just look at who's sitting in the castle. That king is still nominally in charge of Grey Castle. Who cares about his orders? You're right, a woman next to Kanas said in a sweet voice. Besides, even if there's a change in power, it has nothing to do with us. Nobles are nobles, and rats are rats. Don't be fooled by the fact that both of them are in the same city. Rats are rats. I like what you said. Kanas pinched the woman's butt. But the second news is a little strange. In the past, the nobles would inform us in advance if they want to earn a good reputation by giving out food. And if they want to give out food, they'll give out a limited amount. Why does it sound like they're going to feed everyone in the city? No one could answer this question, but Snaketooth knew that everyone was thinking about the 2 free bowls of oatmeal. Could it be that the Lord wants to get some benefits from Lord Bloody Hand? The woman chuckled. Who knows? Kanas shrugged. I'll ask the boss later. He's the only one who knows about the nobles. The so-called Bloody Hand was the king of the western region. It was said that he was close to some small nobles. In a sense, he could no longer be regarded as a pure rat, but an underground noble without a title. In fact, every king had similar connections. Thinking of this, Snaketooth could not help but sigh. He knew that Kanas's little lover was right. The nobles had existed for hundreds of years, and so had the rats. No matter how things changed in power, the underground world always had its own set of rules. His Highness was also a noble, so what could he change? Chapter 463. This was the strangest team Ren Med had ever seen. A detailed map of Longsong's stronghold was placed on a square table in the hall on the first floor of the castle. There were 6 people around the table. They were the commander of the First Army, Iron Axe, the police captain from Border Town, Vader, the current leader of the Inferno Gang, Nightingale, the head of the Security Bureau, Ashes, the black-haired witch, and himself, the Earl of the Elk family. Ren had never thought that one day he would need the help of rats, let alone cooperate with witches. Sirs, there are currently around 7 to 8 gangs of various sizes in the fortress. Lai Gu revealed a fawning smile as he bowed and said, the gang with the most members is the Sickle Gang located in the northern district of the outer city. They have around 500 to 600 members. However, the strongest gang is the Death Knell Gang in the inner city. Most of them are made up of fugitives and mercenaries. They almost don't accept ordinary civilians to join them. They have a lot of weapons and armors. Of course, if they didn't do that, they wouldn't be able to occupy the richest spot. The eastern part of the city is the territory of the Carrion Bugs and the Vulture Gang. With the convenience of the dock area, they mainly sell slaves and Dreamland water, and their methods are very cruel. I heard that these two rat organizations are backed by the Wolf family and the Maple family, but none of the nobles came out to help them when we, the Inferno gang, beat them to a pulp a few years ago, he said with some pride. As for the western part of the city, the gangs are much more complicated. Because they are all small gangs, I have only dealt with their leaders. They are. The news about the gangs is not important, so there is no need to go into details, the tall Majin man interrupted. I just want to ask, can you take us to the underground rat's nest? Ahem, my lord. Lai Gu nodded to him. As the saying goes, when a rat builds a nest, there are 10 holes and 9 holes. I know the main gathering places of the gangs, but it is impossible for me to know every one of their shelters, especially those that are built with dry wells and basements. Only the leaders and their trusted followers know the specific locations. He's right about that. Ren sighed. If we fight them head-on, the rats won't be able to withstand a single blow. But if we want to wipe them out one by one, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult. If we launch a sudden attack, we might still have a chance. But now that the notice has been issued, by the time the operation starts, those leaders should have already hidden themselves. Hide. The black-haired witch sneered. Unless he hides in Redwater City, as long as he stays in Stronghold, there's no one we can't find. Yes, you are right. Lai Gu wiped off the sweat on his forehead and no longer argued anymore. The pressure that this witch named Ashes gave off was really amazing. Ren had been on the battlefield and had also fought with demonic beasts in Hermes, so he knew what a real warrior was like. But even those experienced judges would be overshadowed in front of her. The other party didn't need to put on a scary appearance. Just by standing there, he was enough to make people not dare to look at him directly. There was no doubt that not only had she seen blood and taken the lives of her enemies, but she had also wandered on the edge of life and death, which was why she had such a domineering aura. According to His Highness, we still have 3 days to prepare. After the first batch of rations is distributed, the army will start from the North City Gate and clean up the rat gangs in each area. Iron Axe said in a deep voice, this operation will only target the organizers, and strive to solve Blackstreet in the shortest time possible. But, will it really work? Watching Iron Axe walk to the door of the hall, Ren could not help but ask, there has never been a city that can eliminate the rats. As long as there are people, they will not disappear. Iron Axe looked back at him and said, really? There are no rats in Border Town. After everyone left, only Vader stayed. My lord, has anyone applied for a police position in City Hall? Not yet, but I heard from Perot that dozens of people in the Second Army have applied. Ren slowly sat down with the help of the square table, Iron Axe's words still echoing in his mind. After a while, he asked in a low voice, are there really no rats in Border Town? As for the usual Blackstreet organizations, there are none. Vader shrugged and said, there is no shortage of food or shelter. Both men and women can find a suitable job. Even handymen are paid enough to fill their stomachs. To be honest, before I came to Border Town, I wouldn't have believed that there was such a place in the Kingdom of Grey Castle. Why? Ren could not help but ask. I don't know, my lord. Vader spread out his hands and said, His Highness Roland's conduct is far different from that of any nobleman I've ever seen. Don't call me your lord. He waved his hand and said, His Highness asked us to work together to deal with this matter. We can put our titles aside in private. Vader nodded and did not refuse. Ren quite admired his straightforward character. Do you think His Highness can really eradicate all the rats in Stronghold and make the entire western region a clean land? I'm not sure. Vader's answer slightly surprised him. After all, I used to be a patrol captain and have dealt with rats for several years. Their existence is like a shadow under the sun. It's difficult to rely on forceful means to deal with them. But His Highness said that if it was a big city with 1 million people, he might not be able to manage it well. But if there are only 100,000 people, it's not impossible to get rid of these low-level scum. To put it simply, it's enough to make the people feel that the price of being a rat is too high. At the same time, there are many more suitable alternatives. The price is too high. Ren automatically skipped over the description of a big city with 1 million people. Just 100,000 people was already an incredibly magnificent city. This is not something that can be done in a short time. Yes, fighting against rats or crime is not something that can be done overnight. Vader nodded and said, the police is the organization established by His Highness Roland for this matter. It's completely different from the patrol team. I've already told you about this. They were indeed completely different. They were paid by the city hall and did not listen to the orders of a noble. They maintained the security and order of an area and did not associate with criminals. And, most importantly, His Highness said something to me. What did he say? In fact, I've mentioned your doubts to him. Vader smiled. In the end, His Highness said to me, if you can't do it, you won't do it? Ren Med suddenly felt a jolt in his heart, as if something had suddenly become clear. If you can't do it, you won't do it. If that was the case, he would not have been running on the path of a knight. Although he had taken over the title of Count and seemed to be getting further and further away from the life he liked, as long as he could continue fighting on the battlefield to protect the people, he would not be far away from the path in his heart. On the contrary, it would only become wider and wider. So that's how it is. I understand. He took a deep breath. I was also quite shocked at that time, Vader said emotionally. But I still don't understand what His Highness said at the end. Anything else? Ren asked expectantly. Chapter 464. Joe fell ill. He was the second weakest guy in the gang, and since Paper was abducted, he became the weakest. He was fine on the night he came back from the square, but the next day, Snaketooth found Joe lying motionless on the hay with a faint sound coming from his mouth. His cheeks were terribly red. He's been infected by the cold plague. Sunflower touched Joe's forehead. His head is very hot. Am I going to die? Snaketooth opened his half-closed eyes and asked softly. No one answered. Cold plague was an extremely difficult disease to deal with. Once infected, one could only rely on their body to resist the cold. However, people with good health would rarely be affected by the cold. Generally, those who got sick were weak, so very few patients could survive. For rats, being infected with cold plague was basically a death sentence. I'm going to find Kanas, Snaketooth broke the silence. What for? Ask him to give Joe more food. He stood up abruptly. I've heard that if you catch a cold, you'll have a better chance of surviving if you can fill your stomach and keep your body warm. He won't give it to you. Tigerclaw shook his head. We all know what kind of person he is. That's right. Maybe he'll beat you up. Sunflower gathered the hay. Rats don't feed useless people. Joe isn't useless, Snaketooth retorted. He can read. Just a few. What's the use of them to Kanas? What he wants are people who can fight, rob, steal, and dig. Snaketooth gritted his teeth, turned around, and walked straight to the room of the manager of the Endless Alley. He wanted to try, even if he would be beaten out by Kanas with a stick. But to his surprise, Kanas did not come back. You're lucky. Tigerclaw grinned when he brought the news back to his companions. Otherwise, we might have to take care of one more person. Sunflower sighed. When we distribute the bread, let's give some to Joe. Let him eat more. But Snaketooth did not feel lucky. He faintly felt that something was wrong. It had been less than an hour since he had reported the news to Bloodhand. It could be understood that he had not returned last night to discuss countermeasures, but it was already noon today. No matter what, they should have finished discussing, right? Furthermore, he took the opportunity when his subordinates opened the door to sneak a peek inside. In the end, he discovered that not only was Kanas gone, but even his lover was gone. Not long after, the gang began to distribute food. Snaketooth noticed that it was distributed by Kanas's trusted aide this time. What he got was still half a piece of black bread. For days later, not only did Charles' condition not improve, but it also worsened. Yesterday, he could still shout that it was cold, but today, he couldn't even speak. His bright red face began to turn pale, and his breathing became weaker and weaker. We tried our best, Sunflower rubbed her belly and said listlessly. In the past few days, they had given half of their food to Joe. If not for that, he probably wouldn't have been able to survive until now. Tiger Claw, who was usually full of energy, looked a little weak. Kanas had not shown himself for the past few days. More than 100 rats gathered in the room began to discuss this, but it was just a discussion. After all, food was still distributed as usual, but today, the noise was especially loud. Today was the day of the distribution of relief food. I'll go to the square. Snaketooth hesitated for a long time and finally bit his lip. There's not enough bread for us to eat. If we can get a bowl of hot oatmeal, Joe might be able to survive. Are you crazy? Sunflower glared at him. Don't forget what Kanas warned us. Do you really want your mouth to be sewn shut? The premise is that he knows that I've sneaked away. Now we don't even know where Kanas's people are. Maybe the mayor will really attack them. But his subordinates are still here. Do you think they'll let you go if they find out? Sunflower looked at Tiger Claw. Don't just stand there, tell me about him. I'll go with you, Tiger Claw suddenly said. Maybe the food distribution has already been ruined, or maybe the nobles just want to put on a show. If there's no food at all, it won't be a violation of Kanas's warning, right? Tiger Claw twitched his mouth. Besides, I'm strong enough to carry Joe back and forth. It won't take long. Kanas isn't here now, and his cronies are hiding in his room. No one will notice us. Sunflower hesitated. You stay here, Snaketooth said. In case someone asks, we'll have an explanation. Just say that we had diarrhea and went to find a place to squat. Don't worry, it won't take us long to come back. All right, then, she said, looking around. Come back as soon as you can. Snaketooth and Tiger Claw slipped out of the wooden house and ran along the alley. The snowflakes under their feet soaked their trousers, and the cold wind blew on their faces like knives. Even so, they did not stop running. Panting, they rushed to the square and found that the wooden platform was surrounded by nearly 1,000 people. They were really giving out oatmeal. They hurriedly ran over, but were stopped by 2 guards in brown uniforms. Go that way. No pushing or shoving. Otherwise, you'll be disqualified. It was not until then that Snaketooth noticed that wooden fences had been erected around the podium in the center of the square. The people were like a folded dragon, moving forward through the fences one by one. Guards with strange iron rods stood at regular intervals. They seemed to be the guardians of order. People were driven out of the line from time to time. My friend is sick. Can you help us? Please. Snaketooth knelt down in the snow. He's been hungry for days and needs food. Tiger Claw knelt down as well. What's wrong? It's the cold plague. One of them reached out and lifted the unconscious Joe. Leave him to me. You go line up. He knows the way back, right? The other guard said. Even if he doesn't, you can come here to find him. As they spoke, the guard had already carried Joe away. What should we do? Snaketooth and Tiger Claw looked at each other. No one had expected things to turn out this way. They had thought that the other party would either be indifferent or let them go around the fences to get the oatmeal first. Let's go back first, Snaketooth decided after thinking for a moment. What? Go back? Tiger Claw was surprised. We don't want the oatmeal. It'll take us at least an hour to get there. Accidents might happen if we wait too long. Snaketooth nodded. We'll sneak out in the evening to take Joe back. Tiger Claw reluctantly looked at the wooden platform where the porridge was being distributed. Well, okay. There was one thing that Snake-Tooth did not say. Now that the announcement of food distribution had come true, what about the other two pieces of news? Would they also come true? He had a feeling that Blackstreet was about to usher in a big change. Returning to the endless alley, the two sneaked into the house quietly, but they were suddenly shocked. They saw Sunflower hanging at the door with her hands tied behind her back. She was standing on a wobbly stool while Kana's men stood beside her and looked at the two of them with a sneer. Chapter 465. All of a sudden, Snaketooth's heart sank to the bottom. Let her go. Fear gripped his throat. He opened his mouth, but his voice was very shaky. Do you want to say let her go? Okay. One of them lifted the stool under Sunflower's feet. Her body immediately tensed up. The rope was strangled into Sunflower's neck. She kicked her feet in panic and clenched and unclenched her hands, but all her struggles were in vain. Tiger Claw rushed forward, but was hit hard on the back of his head with a stick. His whole body suddenly froze on the ground. If she hadn't waited for you to come back, she would have been dead. Kana's henchman sneered. What a good excuse. Diarrhea? You probably don't know that the boss has specially arranged people to keep an eye on you. He knows that you stray dogs are difficult to discipline. If he doesn't teach you a lesson, you will really think that the Bloody Hand Gang has no rules. I was wrong. Snaketooth knelt down and said, please let her go. She didn't even step out of this room. But this little bitch lied to me. The henchman shrugged. She also insisted that you were looking for shelter. She didn't admit it even after two of her teeth were knocked out. What's the use of keeping such a person? Give you a chance to take revenge? Snaketooth realized that he wanted to kill them. He raised his head with difficulty. Sunflower's struggle had gradually weakened, and her body began to spasm. He forced himself to look away and focus on the dagger on the waist of his henchman. There were only 5 or 6 steps between them. If he rushed up and grabbed the dagger. Just then, the rope broke. Sunflower fell down without a sound. What the hell? The henchman frowned. But before he finished his words, a line of blood spurted from the side of his neck and sprayed the face of the nearest rat. Snaketooth stared at the scene in front of him, dumbfounded. His mind was blank. What the hell happened? At the same time, there were sounds of fighting outside the house. Stop! This is the territory of the Bloody Hand Gang. Someone broke in. Ah, my hand. Damn it, come out and kill her. Monster. Help. Kana's subordinates looked at each other and drew their weapons. But before they could rush out of the house, a corpse with only half a body flew in from the entrance and knocked over the 2 fellows standing at the front. Only then did Snaketooth see the attacker. It was a beautiful woman with a black ponytail tied casually behind her. She was wrapped in a black robe and her eyes were a rare golden color. Just a glance from her made Snaketooth feel like his blood was about to freeze. Put down your weapons now, put your hands on your head and kneel down, and you'll have a chance to live. The woman stretched out 3 fingers. I'll count to 3. Those who don't do as I say will die. 3. The scene was quiet for only a few breaths of time before someone shouted, Heavens, this kind of trash is definitely worth 100 golden dragon. Everyone, let's go. Capture her and boss will definitely reward you handsomely. Break her tendons, alive. Forget it, it's better for you to die. She raised an amazingly large and strangely shaped sword and rushed toward the crowd. Snaketooth could hardly believe his eyes. That sword was actually made of iron, and any weapon that touched it would break into pieces. Even the lime powder and the hidden crossbow were rendered useless. Her speed was as fast as a whirlwind, and these normally effective hidden weapons were unable to hit their targets. The group of people couldn't even escape from her hands, let alone resist. Protect your people, coward. Snaketooth suddenly heard a voice beside his ear, but when he looked around, he saw nothing. He swallowed and crawled to Sunflower in a flurry, putting his hand gently on her nose. Her warm breath slowly flowed out. She was still alive. Snaketooth felt a lump in his throat. He could no longer suppress his emotions after surviving a disaster. What was said in the announcement was true. These people were sent by His Royal Highness to eliminate the gang organizers. They all survived. He leaned on Sunflower and burst into tears. As more and more soldiers in brown uniforms rushed into the house, the battle quickly ended. All the living rats were ordered to stand in a line and walk out of the house one by one. My head hurts. Tigerclaw touched his head and said, "It's so swollen." "You're lucky you didn't get beaten to death." Snaketooth glared at him, tears still lingering in his eyes. What the hell happened? Sunflower rubbed her neck, where the cyan bruise was clearly visible. "I thought I was going to die. I'll tell you when we get out." Snaketooth shook his head. He was afraid that if he said it now, he would cry again. "Next, it's your turn." The guard at the door twisted his arm behind his back. Snaketooth did not resist and followed the guard out of the door. He saw a woman in a white robe standing outside the yard, just like the other side of the black god of massacre. Her face was covered by a hood, and only strands of blonde curls could be seen. "You can go after answering this lady's questions." "Yes," Snaketooth answered honestly. He was completely shocked by the strength shown by this group of people. "Have you ever killed anyone?" Her voice was clear and melodious, as if it came from another world. "What about rape? Robbery?" He suddenly remembered that she was the invisible person who had warned him. "None." "That's enough." She nodded. "Go to the square and wait for His Highness to distribute dinner." Snaketooth took 2 steps forward and then stopped. He plucked up his courage and asked, "Are you a witch?" "Yes." He thought he would not get an answer, but the other party gave him an affirmative answer. These people are just Kanaza's subordinates." He bit his lip and said in one breath, "He hasn't come back for 4 days. He must be hiding with Bloody Hand. Bloody Hand is the real leader here. Don't let him go." "Don't worry, they can't escape." The other party chuckled, her tone full of unquestionable confidence. "You mean, the people sent by His Highness to kill the leader of the rats are witches?" Tigerclaw's eyes widened. "Not only witches, but also many ordinary people." Snaketooth recounted the bizarre things he had seen. "My previous guess was right. His Highness's territory has accepted the existence of witches. They're just like ordinary people. They can show up in public without any worries, and even fight side by side with everyone." He paused and said excitedly, "If paper was really sent there, she must be living a good life now." "Why, do you still want to see her?" Sunflower curled her lips. "According to what you said, witches are rare talents. You'll only embarrass her if you see her." "Ah." Snaketooth was speechless. He knew that Sunflower was right. He was just a rat. Even if he could survive the winter, his identity would not change. Paper, on the other hand, had probably lived a completely different life and was no longer on the same level as him. Chapter 466. There were more people coming to get their second meal. Fortunately, the 3 of them had been waiting in the square and managed to get a place near the front. It was not until he joined the queue that Snaketooth realized why the fences were built around the wooden platform. The speaker on the platform had changed, but he was still talking endlessly about the new policy. Snaketooth probably had to listen to his nagging before he received his oatmeal. The crowd moved forward slowly. After about a quarter of an hour, he finally went around to the back of the wooden platform. "Show me the back of your right hand," the guard said. Snaketooth did as he was told, and the guard pressed a seal on the back of his hand. "Next." At this point, the wooden fence expanded to both sides, forming an open area. However, the queue was still not over. Under the guidance of the guards, everyone received their wooden bowls, got their porridge, went to the other end to eat the porridge, and put down the bowls. It was hard to believe that this orderly order was created by ordinary civilians and rats. Snake-tooth looked back at the long queue behind him and could not help but feel a sense of absurdity. It was as if they were not begging for charity, but completing a solemn ceremony. What did he stamp on us? Tiger Claw poked his head out from behind him. I can't erase it. Probably to prevent us from lining up again after we finish our porridge, he said, curling his lips. There were tall tents around the open area. Through the light from the fire, he could see many people busy inside. From time to time, someone carried heavy wooden buckets to the long wooden table by the fence, and the guards distributed them to everyone. Obviously, the food was freshly cooked. When the steaming oatmeal was poured into a bowl, Snaketooth's hands could not help but tremble. How long had it been since he had tasted hot food? The oatmeal was not thick, and there were no vegetables or seasonings, but the white surface and the overflowing aroma were enough to make him salivate. Compared with the black bread mixed with pebbles and chaff, the food in the bowl made him taste the sweetness that he had not tasted for a long time. Oh no, my eyes are getting sore again. Snaketooth finished the bowl of white porridge in a few gulps, and even licked the bottom of the bowl clean. Although he had the urge to run back and ask for another bowl, he gave up the idea when he saw the guards watching over him. Reluctantly, he placed the wooden bowl in the designated basin and followed the crowd out of the fenced area. There was a wooden stage at the exit, and the speaker was enthusiastically answering the questions of the crowd. With warm food in their stomachs, even the cold wind was not as cold as before. Snaketooth and the other two slowed down and followed the crowd to the wooden platform. You're asking why His Royal Highness is distributing relief rations? That's a good question. Because His Highness is determined to completely eliminate the rats in the fortress, those who are threatened by the rats and have no choice but to obey them for food can be completely liberated and will no longer be threatened by them. At the same time, some families who did not have enough food could also use it to tide over their difficulties. This is His Highness' benevolence. But you said that the oatmeal would only be served after the months of demons. What should we do after that? Someone asked loudly. The crowd quieted down. Most of them were waiting for the answer. Snaketooth also pricked up his ears. Very simple. You can support yourselves. The announcer laughed. Feed yourself? I don't know how to farm. Your Excellency, can you explain it more clearly? Don't worry, let me tell you slowly. He waved his hand. After the months of demons, Longsong Stronghold and Border Town will merge into a new city. The land in between needs a large number of workers to reclaim and build. This is how you can support yourselves. Work. Only work can create wealth and change your fate. You'll get a stable salary, which can not only support yourselves but also your families. At the same time, His Highness has promised that anyone who has a formal job will be accepted as a citizen of the new city. His words caused a stir in the crowd. Snaketooth felt his heart beating fast. Yes, I know what you're all thinking, the announcer said loudly. There are many rats among you, or citizens who were forced to become rats. But it doesn't matter. Through labor, you'll get a new life. You won't have to live in the dark underground anymore, and you won't have to worry about being sent to the gallows one day. You can rely on your own hands to exchange for legitimate rewards, whether it's food, clothes, or even a shelter from the wind and rain. Sir, as long as we're willing to work. He nodded with a smile. When the time comes, His Highness will need more than tens of thousands of people, so, yes, as long as we're willing to work. Snaketooth suddenly felt like he understood something. In the next few days, the three of them went to the central square to get oatmeal at noon. More and more citizens heard the news and went there, almost occupying half of the square. Of course, some people didn't come for food, they just wanted to witness the end of the Black Street Rats. Almost every day in Stronghold was like a festival. After the oatmeal was served at noon, a trial and execution took place on the other side of the square. Just as the white-robed woman had said, not a single rat could escape their pursuit. Snaketooth saw Kanaz's figure in the trial. His face was pale, and he was trembling slightly while kneeling on the scaffold. He had completely lost his usual arrogant demeanor. Then, with a roar from the iron pipe, his head was smashed. In addition to Kanaz, there were many other big shots whose names he had only heard of. For example, Bloody Hand, Iron Raven, Ripper, they were all notorious kings of the Black Street. Their performance was not much better than Kanaz's. The death of each Rat King would set off enthusiastic cheers. In the end, the onlookers chanted, "Long live His Highness," while watching the criminals being executed. On the fourth day, Snaketooth saw Joe again. He seemed to have completely recovered, and the four of them hugged each other excitedly. "Where have you been these days?" "I don't know." Joe shook his head. "I was in a daze, and when I woke up, I was already lying in a tent. My head didn't hurt anymore. Then I ate and slept until the fever subsided. There were several patients like me, and they even put jerky in their oatmeal. I almost swallowed my tongue the first time. Is there such a good thing?" Tigerclaw widened his eyes. "Damn it, I want to be infected with a cold plague." "Anyway, it's good that you survived," Sunflower said happily. After everyone sighed for a while, Snaketooth suddenly said, "When the months of demons are over, I want to find a job. Maybe those nobles are just fooling us, and there may be all kinds of additional requirements." Tigerclaw spread out his hands and said, "You see, they've already started to recruit soldiers and policemen of the Second Army. They're all asking for a fixed address, a clean background, and no criminal record. They're not even allowed to steal. They're not taking us into consideration at all." Snaketooth shook his head and did not answer. The things mentioned in the announcement were becoming reality bit by bit. He realized that the so-called new city of the prince might be far beyond his imagination. In these few short yet long days, he had gradually felt the changes. Chapter 467. Vendi, Scroll, and Spear sat in the hall on the first floor of the castle, sharing top-grade black tea from the City of Glow. Wendy took down the bubbling kettle from the fireplace and poured the boiling well water into the teacup. Watching the water gradually dyed into a transparent orange-red color, and the rich fragrance wafted from the billowing white mist, Wendy felt her whole body become lazy. After blowing away the steam from the teacup, she took a small sip. After the slight bitterness, the sweetness lingered in her mouth. Warmth flowed into her stomach, and she couldn't help but hum in satisfaction. On the other side of the hall, paper was still competing with the sigil of God's will. She had now mastered the technique of injecting magic power into the sigil and could control the output of magic power more precisely. However, no matter how hard she tried, she could only light up the first magic stone on the sigil. "Seeing her reminds me of the days in the Witch Cooperation Association," Scroll lamented. "At that time, no one would have thought that we could still live like this. If we could predict it in advance, Kara wouldn't be so stubborn." Vendi put down the teacup. "Fortunately, the awakened sisters don't have to go through the hardships we went through." She paused and smiled. "Perhaps, we're the last batch of witches to suffer. And also the oldest batch, with the shortest time to enjoy the good life." Scroll put her hand on her forehead and said, "It sounds like we've suffered a lot. So, you came back so early today because you wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to enjoy more leisure time?" Wendy joked. "I only left after I finished my official business." The latter shrugged. "His Highness isn't here, so there are fewer things to do. I'm not used to it." "Really?" Wendy raised her eyebrows and said, "When His Highness returns, I will tell him these words without missing a single word. Well, in the next exam, I can't guarantee that you'll be able to understand every question. You guys have such a good relationship." Spear chuckled. "I'm not young anymore, but I don't feel as deeply as you do. I'm probably one of the lucky ones among the witches." Of course, not every witch has a powerful father. Scroll took a sip of tea, moreover, he will pass everything to his daughter. Even among the nobles, such a person is a minority. By the way, how do you feel about the city hall? Vendi looked at her. I heard that you've been going there whenever you're free. I've benefited a lot. Spear heaved a long sigh. It's the first time I've seen such a well-organized and closely related management method. Compared to letting several ministers handle this matter alone, having the city hall bear the employees' salaries themselves can not only avoid the difficulty of replacing people, but also allow capable civilians to join without any hindrance. I really don't know how His Highness thought of this. She even had a good chat with Barav, Scroll said, covering her mouth. Ahem, he asked me for some advice on the nobles' laws, which I happen to know quite well. Spear shook her head. Also, His Highness' new law is very unique. It might be implemented in Fallen Dragon Ridge in the future, so I couldn't help but discuss it with him for a while. Oh. What's unique about it? For example, the definition of the people. Sister Wendy, when will I be able to light up the second magic stone? Paper came up to them and raised the sigil of God's will, whining. When you're older. She held out her hand to the little girl. Come, let me hug you. Paper grabbed her hand and crawled into her embrace on all fours. Vendi stroked Paper's head. Watching the two of them discuss the new law, she felt a sense of tranquility in her heart. If only this kind of life could last forever. Just then, a guard walked into the hall. He looked around for a while, then hesitantly walked toward the four of them. What happened? Vendi recognized him. He was one of His Highness' personal guards. Lady Vendi, a townsfolk, has arrived outside the castle. She claims that her daughter has just awakened as a witch. He put his hand on his chest and bowed. His Highness has instructed me to let you handle this matter if he's not here. What? The three of them were stunned. A newly awakened witch? That's what she said. Take me to her, Vendi said immediately. At the gate of the castle district, she saw two townspeople waiting in the cold wind. One of them was about 40 years old. His hair was half white, and the wrinkles on his forehead were deep and long. He was wearing an old coat, and his body was slightly hunched. The other was much younger, about 17 or 18 years old. He stood next to the old woman with a cautious expression. This is Lady Vendi of the Witch Union, the guard introduced. My lady, hello. The two of them bowed respectfully. They said that they were immigrants from the Southern Territory. They moved into the inner city a month and a half ago. I've also checked their IDs, and they basically match the information on them. Are you a witch? Vendi looked at the young woman and asked in the softest possible tone, what's your name? My lady is asking you a question. The woman pulled at her sleeve. Summer, the latter said in a low voice. Are you her mother? Yes, yes, yes. Her father is still working in the furnace district, so I sent her here first. The woman nodded. My lady, may I ask, what His Highness said on the notice, is it true that witches are paid a golden dragon every month? Yes, if she's willing to join the witch union. Summer opened her mouth. She's willing. Of course, she's willing to dedicate everything to His Highness. The mother interrupted her daughter. Do we need to sign a contract? When can we get the money? Vendi could not help but frown at the woman's words. From her tone, it was not difficult to tell that the woman obviously regarded her daughter as a commodity for sale, and even more so, regarded the witch union as a place for His Highness to amuse himself. She suppressed the displeasure in her heart and replied calmly, His Highness is now dealing with government affairs in Longsong Stronghold, and I don't know when he will come back. In addition, before joining the union, you need to go through a review and test. You can leave your daughter in the castle and wait for His Highness to return to Border Town before signing the contract. After all, no matter what, Summer was innocent, and she did not want to spread her anger towards the ignorant to the innocent. Although most of the natives of Border Town had accepted witches, the refugees who came to the western region after the months of demons still had a deep misunderstanding about witches. Then I'll leave it to you, my lady. The woman bowed again and patted her daughter's head. Behave well and don't let His Highness down. Chapter 468. Genius in a Second to Remember Love. Shoanet, providing you with wonderful novel reading. Summer, right? Don't worry. Vendi stepped forward and took her hand. The witch union isn't what your family thinks. You don't have to stay in the castle. Really? She asked in a low voice. Of course it's true, Wendy said with a smile. We live in the castle because we have no other place to go. Before His Royal Highness took us in, all witches lived like street children. Their families were either broken, or they treated their sisters as strangers. So, you still have a family of your own, you can already be considered a lucky person. She paused. Let's go, it's very windy here. Okay. The girl lowered her head and followed her into the castle. Is this the newly awakened witch? Scroll had been waiting at the door. What's her name? Summer. Vendi looked at the guard. Can you help me inform Miss Agatha and ask her to go back to the castle? Tell her there's a new witch in town. She should be in the chemistry lab by the river. It's my pleasure. The guard saluted and left. Indeed. Without Nightingale and Sylvie, only Agatha can distinguish the type and size of magic power. Scroll nodded. What's her ability? I don't know yet. Vendi touched her head. How old are you this year? 10, 18. Summer became nervous again, probably because there were a few strangers in front of her. 18 years old? Spear was surprised. Isn't that an adult? When did you find out you were awakened as a witch? Scroll asked. Tell us the details. Just 3 days ago, on the night of my coming of age, Asya replied in a soft voice, my brother caught a fish from the river and wanted to give it to me, but it was snatched away by my second sister. In the end, only half of the tail was left for me. I hugged the quilt and cried all night. I even dreamed that the fish returned to the bowl. When I woke up, I found that the fish was still there, and I had an older sister. Another older sister, what do you mean? Vendi asked in surprise. One was sitting at the table eating fish, and the other was paralyzed with fear. But soon, both the fish and the second sister disappeared. Xia recalled, I could feel at that time, those extra things should have something to do with me. However, when I told them about it, my father beat me up. He said that I shouldn't have scared my second sister. I really didn't mean to scare her. Who knew that a dream would come true? That wasn't a dream, Vendi affirmed. It was a call to awaken. When magic gathered in a witch's body, it was also the so-called Day of Awakening. During this process, witches could not only feel the changes in their bodies, but also because most people were unable to suppress the strange magic, it would lead to the spontaneous use of their abilities. Therefore, in the past, apart from the extremely difficult day of adulthood, the second reason for the loss of witches was the Day of Awakening. Everyone knew what would happen if they unconsciously displayed the strange effects of magic in public. However, Vendi had never seen the Day of Awakening and the Day of Adulthood coinciding. Of course, it was not impossible, because the Day of Adulthood itself was a relatively special Day of Awakening. Later, my second sister said that I was a witch and couldn't stay at home anymore. My brother said that it didn't matter if I was a witch, since there were so many witches in the town. My family quarreled over this. Xia's voice became lower and lower. Finally, they decided to send me here. It seemed that even the people who had just arrived in the Southern Territory had begun to be influenced by the town's propaganda. Fortunately, she would not be tied up and handed over to the church like many of her sisters. Unfortunately, her family had never been able to fully accept a witch. However, Vendi believed that this kind of thing would slowly change over time. The town's natives were the best example. After she continued to ask about some details, Agatha walked into the hall, looking travel-worn. Is this the new witch in the town? Vendi nodded and briefly described Summer's identity and awakening experience. How does the union test a witch's ability? It's generally divided into two parts. After listening to Summer, Agatha took out a magic stone from her waist pocket. One part is to observe the specific performance of the ability, and the other part is to use the stone of measuring to measure the comprehensive level of magic power. Then she looked at Summer and said, "Close your eyes and feel the magic power running in your body." "Do we need her to cooperate?" Vendi asked worriedly. "She just became a witch 3 days ago, so I'm afraid she knows nothing about magic power." "No need," Agatha laughed in a low voice. "I'm just worried that she'll be afraid." As she spoke, the stone filled with magic power bloomed with a pale green light and enveloped Summer. A cloud of mist gradually appeared on her chest, the center of which was pale yellow and looked as if it would dissipate at any time. She didn't lie. After observing for a moment, Agatha stopped the operation of the magic stone. It's indeed a characteristic that the day of awakening and the day of adulthood happen on the same day. The type of ability is magic power, which is the summoning type that you're familiar with. The level of magic power is extremely low. Extremely low. Vendi was startled. Has such a coincidence ever happened in Tequila? The Union has witnessed the awakening of thousands of witches, so this kind of thing is not rare, Agatha said with a little pride. For witches who awaken at the end of adulthood, it's equivalent to not having the day of adulthood. What? Their magic power can't form a cyclone, so they remain in the state before adulthood. Naturally, they won't have the branching ability and stable enhancement unique to adulthood. I don't know whether such witches can have a higher awakening, but if they can't go further, the problem of magic power will plague them for the rest of their lives. At this point, she paused. Let's take a look at Summer's ability first. After all, the amount of magic power is only one aspect. The ability itself is what determines a witch's value. Agatha. Vendi frowned. All witches should be like sisters who share a brotherly bond, instead of measuring each other's value by ability. That's how it is in the Holy City. Agatha was not moved at all. Of course. I also believe in His Highness's words. Every ability has its own unique use, but there are still differences between them. What are you arguing about? Summer opened her eyes, looking confused. Nothing. Vendi reluctantly smiled at her and comforted her. Try to show us your ability first. The little girl held her breath and slowly stretched out her hands. Soon, the four of them saw the changes. Vendi, Scroll, and Spear reappeared by the tea table in the hall. Although the latter two were talking, they couldn't hear anything. Paper, who had left the hall a long time ago, appeared by Vendi's side again. She slowly climbed into her arms, revealing a sweet smile. Chapter 469. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go. Shoa.net provides you with wonderful novels to read. When the illusion disappeared, the hall fell into a strange silence. After a long time, Scroll heaved a sigh of relief and said, "No wonder your second sister was so frightened that she fell to the ground. Such a scene is indeed a little terrifying. The ability to produce group illusions is quite rare, but it's not impossible." Agatha said slowly. "When I was in the Union, I knew at least 2 people who had similar abilities, and one of them was a senior witch in Starfall City." "How many times can you use this ability every day?" Vendi asked. "Can you control the specific time when the illusion appears?" According to His Royal Highness' habit, the next step should be to test all aspects of the ability to understand its characteristics, consumption, and use. "Probably 2 or 3 times, Summer replied in a low voice. "What's the time period? Do you mean how long ago you can see?" Seeing the former nod, she scratched her head in embarrassment. "I haven't tried it either, but the further I go, the harder it gets." Vendi couldn't help but laugh. "That's not strenuous. You're consuming the magic power in your body. Mana? You should be able to feel it. It's like water flowing in your body, or like a swirling fog. Every time you use your ability, you need to use it, Scroll explained. There are many other characteristics of magic power, we will slowly teach you later. Summer nodded slightly. Then Vendi asked her to use all her strength to cast another illusion. This time, the results showed that it was about a day and a half ago. She could see that the hall was already lit up and the sisters of the Witch Union were sitting at the long table enjoying their dinner. After that, Summer's magic power was completely exhausted. The girl lowered her arms, panting, and fine beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Vendi recorded the results of the 2 tests in her notebook. As for the purpose, she couldn't think of it at the moment. After all, the illusion could only show what had happened in the past, and it couldn't predict the future. Perhaps she could only wait for His Highness Roland to come back before she could make a judgment. Thinking of this, she could not help but feel a little depressed. His Royal Highness had once revealed to her that he intended to turn the Witch Union into a self-operating organization, with her as the leader. But she wasn't as knowledgeable and experienced as His Highness, so she couldn't consider the application of her sister's abilities as thoroughly as he could. Calming herself down, Vendi was about to say a few words of encouragement when Scroll gestured at her. As they walked to the side, she asked softly, "What's wrong? Are you going to tell Summer that it's okay to stay here if she doesn't want to go home?" Scroll frowned. "Have you forgotten the examination before joining the Witch Union?" Vendi, of course, knew that foreign witches had to answer 10 general questions about their identity and origins under Nightingale's lie detection ability before they could be regarded as one of the same kind. But it's unlikely that Summer is a fake. Her ID card was made by Soroya, and her origins are all right. What's more, she has just awakened and is still a non-combat witch. Even the church can't predict this kind of situation. Magic power isn't the only thing that can hurt people. A dagger or a bag of poison can have the same effect, or even better. No, how could she? But you can't deny this possibility, Scroll interrupted. City Hall is responsible for the check-in, so they won't check every family member. At this time, the sudden awakening became the best opportunity to sneak into the castle. She paused. Of course, I know that such a possibility is very small, but don't forget that we can't afford to lose His Highness Roland. Besides, Her Highness Tilly is also living in the Witch Building. If anything happens to her, I'm afraid that the Sisters of Sleeping Island will completely break off their relationship with Border Town, and everything His Highness has done will go down the drain. We can't afford such a price. Vendi fell silent. She knew that Scroll's worry was not unreasonable, and it was not aimed at Summer personally, but she still found it hard to accept. Summer was the first witch to awaken in Border Town after Roland became the Lord, but she was regarded as a potential enemy. This contrast was really uncomfortable. After a long time, she said, "I know. I'll send her back. I'll accompany you to send her off," Scroll sighed. After leaving the castle, the girls suddenly became much more lively. She began to take Vendi's hand and ask more about witches and the Lord. "What's wrong?" Vendi asked casually after satisfying her curiosity. "You seem to be very happy that you don't have to live in the castle." "Ah." Summer choked and then lowered her head in embarrassment. "I heard that the Lord, that is, His Highness, is a very terrible person. He tortures the women around him many times every day." Vendi almost choked on her saliva. "Where did you hear that? Isn't he the 4th Prince of Grey Castle? I've heard of him many times in Eagle City. There are even ballads about him. The 2nd prince is insidious and despicable, the 4th prince is greedy and lustful, and only the 3rd princess of the port of Clearwater is a truly good king," Summer whispered. "I see," Scroll said with great interest. "This is probably Garcia's way of advertising. It's quite unique. Isn't he that kind of person?" Of course not," Vendi said with a flushed face. "You'll know in the future that he's the most trustworthy lord for witches." After arriving at the residential area where Summer's family lived, the three of them walked up to a two-story building and knocked on the door of her house. It was Summer's mother who opened the door. "Mom, I'm back," Summer shouted happily. "Why are you?" She was startled and looked at the two people behind her daughter, looking a little flustered. "Did she do something wrong? Don't you want her anymore? His Highness hasn't come back yet, so she can live in the castle and wait for His Highness to come back," the woman said eagerly. "Summer is very obedient. Although she's a little slow, she's willing to do anything." "Madam, the witch union isn't what you think it is." Vendi felt a burst of anger in her heart. Before she could finish her sentence, Scroll stopped her. The latter took out a golden dragon from her waist pocket and waved it in front of Summer's face. "Your daughter is indeed a daughter. When His Highness comes back, you can sign a contract with her. This is the payment for the first month. Keep it well." "Yes, yes." The woman's attention immediately shifted to the golden coin. "Thank you, Your Excellency. Remember, you're now taking care of her on behalf of His Highness. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Excellency. I'll take good care of Summer." After leaving the residential area, Vendi could no longer suppress the anger in her heart. "Why did you give the payment to that kind of person? Even if you give it to her in advance, it's what she deserves. Can Summer keep that golden dragon?" Scroll's answer startled Vendi. "If she can't keep it, it'll fall into the hands of her family sooner or later. If she can keep it, it'll be even worse. I'm afraid those people will completely regard her as an outsider. On the contrary, if she directly gives it to her mother, not only will Summer not feel burdened, they may even treat her better. There's still a long way to go. If this golden dragon can be exchanged for a more comfortable living environment, it might be a good deal." She thought for a moment and then said, "You're right. I was too naive." The successive setbacks made Vendi very depressed. She thought with some sadness that maybe she was not the right person to lead the witch union. Chapter 470. Half a month later, Roland finally set foot on his way back. After Thunder had wiped out the 4 big families and the Black Street Rats, Longsong's stronghold had temporarily become a blank piece of paper that he could do whatever he wanted. All the relief and resettlement measures were carried out in an orderly manner. Although the Golden Dragon and food found in the territories of Maple Leaf, Wolf, and Wild Rose were not as abundant as those found in Duke Ryan's territory, they were still an amazing amount of income. Because of this, he could expand the scope of relief food to all the people in the city and use the porridge distribution time to publicize the policy. The effect was remarkable. On the day of his departure, the Second Army had recruited the planned 500 people, and the police department also had a new team of about 200 people. Roland left half of the soldiers and Vader in Longsong's stronghold. Apart from the daily defense and vigilance, he also wanted to train these new soldiers into useful soldiers as soon as possible. He knew that this blank period would not last long. If he did not quickly establish a direct connection between the people and City Hall, and penetrate his power into the grassroots, the decadent and old-fashioned order would come back and fill the power vacuum. Without destruction, there can be no construction. He had already completed the goal of destruction, and the next step was the stage of construction. What gave Roland confidence was the solid support of Border Town. The total population had increased to more than 30,000, and more than half of the population was receiving basic education. In the future, it would only be the size of 2 middle schools, but in this era, it was an extremely amazing scale. The education that was popularized to every citizen was not only about literacy, but also basic natural knowledge, political thinking, and instilled with national consciousness. The improvement of their cultural level would allow them to have enough people at the grassroots level to push for change. Compared to the ignorant people who did not know why they were fighting and were resigned to suffering, the awakening of their national consciousness would allow them to explode with unimaginable power. The citizens of Border Town were the seeds that he had sown. One day, they would set off a prairie fire on this continent. As the sky gradually darkened, the vague outline of the town appeared in front of Roland. "Look, what's that?" a noble behind him exclaimed. "A bridge?" Another man craned his neck to look. "My God, it's too long." "That's impossible. There are only 2 pillars. How can they support such a long bridge?" "Wait. It looks like it's made of iron." On the way back, in addition to the witches, Roland's ship also had dozens of nobles on board. They were either from poor families or had low titles, so they kept a respectful distance from the rebellion. Therefore, they were able to escape his purge. According to the plan, they would learn the hierarchical management method of the city hall in Border Town. When the city was officially built, they would return to the fortress and assist Perrault in building the low-level city hall. They would then execute and give feedback to the orders that they issued. After losing the privileges of the noble fiefdoms, these people could only rely on their own abilities if they wanted to advance further. When the fleet crossed the silver-edged steel bridge, Roland heard the nobles behind him gasp in surprise. The group of people couldn't help but hold their breath, silently watching the iron bridge across the river pass over their heads. The prince could not help but feel a little funny. This group of people had never stopped exclaiming since they boarded the ship. At first, they were surprised that the ship made of stone could float on the water, then they were very curious about the rotating wheel and the steam engine that spewed out white fog. Unfortunately, the 3 supplies project in Border Town hasn't been completed yet, he thought maliciously. Otherwise, when these people see the bright and stable light, their eyeballs will definitely pop out. With a long whistle, the ship slowly docked next to the dock. Berev, Carter, and a large group of City Hall officials, who had long received the pigeon message, had been waiting on the shore for a long time. When they saw Roland, they even sounded the bell and performed a welcoming ceremony according to the etiquette of welcoming the king. Roland smiled and patted their shoulders. Then he took Berev to the nobles of Stronghold and introduced them to each other. "I'll leave the accommodation, life, and study of these people to you," he whispered in the chief's ear. "Don't worry about their identity and titles. At most, they're just barren. There are all kinds of people in the mine, but they still have to work honestly. Train them in the same way as the new graduates. I want to see the results as soon as possible." "Yes, Your Highness." When he returned to the castle, the witches who had heard the news had already gathered in the hall. Roland had just stepped through the door, but before he could feel the warmth that he hadn't felt for a long time, a warm body had already thrown itself into his chest. Smelling the familiar fragrance coming from her hair, he smiled and touched the other's head. "I'm back." "Well," Anna raised her head, her lake blue eyes rippling, "I've been waiting for you for a long time." "Me too." "And me, too." Soon, Roland felt an extra weight on both sides of his arms. He didn't have to look to know that besides Lightning and Maggie, no other witches would disturb him and Anna at this time. "Hey, you're just following him, okay?" Mystery Moon shouted. "That's right," Lily snorted. "Shameless." "It's good that you all came back safely," Vendi said softly with a smile. "We should have a good celebration tonight," Scroll suggested. "Oh. I want ice cream bread." Andrea cheered. "With ashes and chavies, I want to eat a big plate." The last one to come forward was Tilly Wimbledon. She held out her hand and said with a relaxed expression, "You've worked hard." "Thank you." Roland raised the corner of his mouth and took the hand offered by the other party. After the sumptuous dinner, Roland returned to his office and let out a long sigh. Although the castle in Stronghold was much larger, he still felt more comfortable in this small place. Just as he was about to tidy up the books that had been transported from Stronghold, Anna opened the door and walked in. "You came just in time." Roland pointed to the books piled on the carpet. "Look, these are the gifts I brought for you." Most of them were historical records and legends, and some of the secrets of the Western region. They were all taken from the Duke's study. "By the way, this book is..." Before he finished speaking, he felt a pair of soft lips press against his. There was a slight heat in the fragrance, and there was a moist smell in the dry air. After they separated, Anna calmly looked into his eyes and said word by word, "I missed you so much." Looking at the ripples in her eyes, Roland felt a surge of warmth in his heart. "This book, I can read it later." "I think so." Chapter 471. A genius in a second to remember if you want to go. On the web, we provide you with wonderful novels to read. The next day, Roland walked into the office, humming a tune, and found Vendi already waiting in the room. "What's the matter?" He stepped over the messy books on the floor and poured her a cup of tea. "Congratulations, there's another witch in town." She smiled and told him what had happened in the past few days. "If you need, I can inform Summer to go to the castle at any time." The first witch to awaken in his territory. This was also the first reward after the public recruitment. Roland could not help but feel happier, but when he heard the second half of the sentence, he asked curiously, "Is she not in the castle now?" "No, because Nightingale is not here, so there is no way to verify her identity." Vendi repeated Scroll's insistence. "We sent her home and paid her a month's salary in advance." "That's not a bad decision." Roland nodded. "Let her come over to sign the contract in the afternoon." "Yes." Wendy answered. She looked like she wanted to say something but hesitated. "What's the matter? Aren't you angry about those people's opinions of you and the witch union, and—" She was silent for a moment, then said through gritted teeth, "And my ability may not be suitable to manage the union. Scroll is more experienced and mature than I am, so I think it's better for her to manage it." "I guess you also mentioned this to Scroll?" Roland asked with great interest. "And she thought you were the most suitable candidate?" "Huh. It seems so." He exhaled. "And I feel the same as her. Management skills and methods can be mastered through practice, but it's difficult to change one's own character. Haven't you noticed? Apart from Maggie, you're the most popular witch among all of us. Besides, Scroll mainly works in the Ministry of Education and will become busier in the future, so she won't have much time to communicate with the new witches. This is also your strength, so have more confidence in yourself. I'm very good at judging people." Without waiting for Vendi to reply, the prince continued, "As for the foreign subjects' misconceptions about the witch union, it was my negligence. I never thought that this body, no, my previous reputation would spread throughout the entire kingdom." He thought for a while. "If we want to change this perception as soon as possible, apart from increasing publicity, I think it's better to let the organization operate independently as soon as possible." "Operate independently?" "Yes, turn it into an independent department like City Hall." Roland had also considered this problem before. Currently, there were only a dozen or so witches in the alliance, which he could still cope with. However, if the alliance expanded to hundreds of witches in the future, or even thousands of witches like the Holy City Tequila, it was obviously impossible for him to arrange jobs one by one. They needed to establish a functional system that could operate on its own to deal with the witches' employment arrangements, and Roland himself would only provide guidance on the use of their abilities and the direction of their evolution. After explaining his idea to Roland, Vendi hesitated and said, "But there are hundreds of people in City Hall, while we only have a dozen sisters, most of whom have their own things to do. Moreover, what does this have to do with changing the opinion of the subjects? Rumors are the same as fear. They both come from the unknown. The reason the town's residents can accept witches is because they have experienced the benefits brought by Nana and Lily up close." Roland laughed. "If we can let ordinary people join the witch union, we can not only solve the problem of the union's lack of manpower, but also let them have a deeper understanding of the organization. The spontaneous publicity of the people will undoubtedly be more effective in changing the outsiders' misunderstanding of witches, and the content of your work, as well as your important contributions to the town, will also be widely known. Just like in the Academy of Sciences, not all scientists, the daily chores, administrative receptions, research arrangements, and other trivial matters required the participation of a large number of ordinary people. If he wanted to let the witches be accepted by all the people, the most important thing was to understand each other. Putting witches in various industries and letting ordinary people participate in the witches' work were the same. I see. Vendi nodded. This is indeed a good idea. But how do we determine the candidates? Since it's an independent operation, of course you have to recruit and select your own people. Roland touched his chin and said, "You can ask Countess Spear about this. She should be very good at how to build an organization with witches as the core. But now the number of people in the union is still small, so you can first recruit an assistant or a civil servant to practice. After the months of demons, I will also build a new building next to the city hall as a dedicated office for the union." There was still the second half of what he wanted to say. Since it was the witch union, it could not only govern the witches of the western region or Grey Castle in the future. If he could build a framework, it could also play a role in quickly integrating the witch organizations of other kingdoms in the future. I understand. Vendi took a deep breath. If you decide to give this task to me, I will try my best. After Vendi left, Roland continued to tidy up the books that he had not finished yesterday. Looking at the scattered pages on the ground, he could not help but think of the hot and suffocating long kiss yesterday. Whether it was the fragrance of Anna's hair, her watery eyes, or her soft body, they all made him feel a strong impulse. Although she had burned all her clothes in the yard without any scruples when they first met, he had not been so excited as he was now. Perhaps she was still a weak and helpless little girl at that time, but now she had grown into a slim and beautiful girl. Too many changes had happened to her in just a year. Maybe he should be more proactive and respond to her feelings. As Roland was thinking, his hand touched another finger. When he came back to his senses, he found that Nightingale had handed the book to him. "Let me help you." "Ah." Roland suddenly stopped. Yesterday, it had only been a few seconds since Anna entered the office and hugged him. He did not notice whether Nightingale had followed her into the room after the dinner party. "Don't worry, I went out immediately last night. I didn't stay and make things difficult for her." Nightingale rolled her eyes. "I knew that she would come to you after not seeing you for a long time. She never suppresses her feelings." "Is that it?" With Nightingale's help, the books were quickly sorted and put into the cabinets, filling up the empty bookcase. Done. Roland stuffed the last book into the gap that had been opened with great difficulty. "Thank you." "You too. How much longer do you want to delay? Don't let her wait forever." Roland was stunned. He turned his head, but found that Nightingale had disappeared, and her words still echoed in his ears. Although her voice was very low, he was sure that he had not heard wrongly. Chapter 472. A genius will remember love in 1 second divided by small. Say net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. On the way to the backyard of the North Slope Mountain, Roland's ears were still echoing with this sentence. Love goes small. Say could he felt a gap in his heart opening little by little. That's right, he thought, I'm no longer the cartographer who dealt with mechanical drawings all day long. This is also not the world I was familiar with in the past. He is now gradually becoming a lord who commands a region, and may even become the ruler of a kingdom in the future. When the situation changes, it is no longer appropriate to use the previous concepts to bind himself. Just follow the thoughts in the depths of your heart, he told himself. If you force each other because of some imaginary rules, it will only hurt both sides. There is no benefit. Thinking of this, Roland's mood suddenly opened up a lot. He took a deep breath of the cold air and slowly pushed open the door to the backyard. The open iron door was like a crack in the bottom of his heart, opening up a new world in an instant. Ah, it's your highness, Hummingbird, and Lucia ran forward and saluted. You're here. Anna showed a sweet smile. Seeing the faint red mark on her white neck, Roland couldn't help but think of her fiery passion last night. But since he had already made up his mind, he didn't care about the last bit of time he had to wait. "How is it, did you make the model?" "Of course," Anna made a follow-me gesture. The two walked out of the back door of the courtyard and saw an iron ship floating in the middle of a pool surrounded by snow. The iron ship was about 1 meter long and 20 centimeters wide. It was much more slender compared to those crude cement ships. The bow of the ship was clearly shaped like a shuttle, and the rear end was flat. The most special thing was that the bottom of the ship was covered with crisscrossing support bars, looking like countless square lattices joined together. "This is what I want," Roland sighed. Compared to the reinforced concrete stone ship, the pure steel ship had a unique and delicate feeling, especially when matched with the dense crisscrossing beams. It was simply like a work of art. He knew that every module of this ship model was completely scaled down and cut by Blackfire. Not a single joint was omitted. If it was in the future, it would be a fine product worth tens of thousands. "Is it the new ship you want to build?" "Yes." He nodded. "It's also the town's first official warship." Originally, Roland had intended to use the concrete boat as the hull of the shallow-water heavy gunboat. However, he found that the speed of the concrete boat was the most significant shortcoming due to the insufficient power of the steam engine. With only fuel and crew on board, the average speed of the entire fleet on this expedition to Longsong's stronghold was only 8 to 9 kilometers per hour. If a 152 mm Longsong stronghold cannon was installed on the boat, as well as the necessary ammunition and other combat weapons, the speed was likely to drop below 5 km per hour. In terms of knots, it was impossible to guarantee a speed of 3 knots. The reason was that concrete was too heavy. It didn't matter if it was used for transportation, but as a warship, it was naturally better to be lighter. If there was a serious shortage of steel 2 months ago, he would have had to accept it no matter how slow it was. However, with the production of the Star of Steel, the current steel reserves were enough for him to build a real iron-armored warship. In terms of structure, Roland chose the simplest modular assembly method, which was to weld pieces of steel plates together with horizontal beams to form a large hollow box structure. Then, he put together many flat boxes to form the bottom plate of the hull. This building method did not require a keel, and had nothing to do with the classical method. In addition, the enemy did not threaten his own cannons at all, so he did not need to worry about defense. The sides of the ship were almost made of thin iron sheets, which minimized the cost and weight. As for the power part, Roland decided to invest in the new ship with the propeller technology instead of the paddle-wheel drive of the concrete boat. The power unit was still a steam engine, which drove 2 propellers with rotating gears. However, in the design plan that he gave to Anna, he left room for modification of the triple expansion steam engine. He planned to modify it into a new steam engine that was more suitable for ships in the future. Back in the yard, Anna began to cut the first steel plate. The Blackfire was like the most precise ruler in her hand. As it flew up and down, a thick piece of steel that was 1 meter square was instantly cut into 7 or 8 thin plates as if she was peeling a potato. The thickness of each plate was exactly 5 millimeters, no more and no less. The next step was welding. Hummingbird put the lightened steel beam between 2 plates, and Anna's Blackfire turned into thin filaments that could not be seen with the naked eye and penetrated the bottom of the beam. Like a suture, she tied the 3 plates together and increased the temperature at the same time. Unlike the initial open flame welding, this heating from the inside to the outside allowed the flowing molten steel to completely fill the gaps between the plates. When the 3 plates were completely joined together, the longitudinal beam had slightly sunk by about 1 millimeter, which was proof that the bottom of the beam had melted and filled the gap between the 2 plates. A staggered cross-shaped longitudinal beam could connect 4 plates, and more cross-shaped beams could form a hollow box unit. These units would be lightened by Hummingbird and transported to the Redwater River, where the final assembly process would be completed in the shipyard. Roland's eyes were fixed on the busy figure of Anna. The girl's long flaxen hair swayed back and forth as she cut, like a dancing elf in the pure white snow. In the afternoon, Roland met the newly awakened witch, Summer. Since she could appear in the office, it meant that she had passed the examination of Nightingale. As for her special ability, Wendy had already recorded it very clearly, so Roland didn't do any more tests. Instead, he directly placed the contract in front of her. Summer held the pen stiffly for a while before she said with a red face, "I can't write." "It doesn't matter." Roland smiled and said, "You can just press your fingerprint." She carefully pressed her ink-stained thumb to the end of the parchment and asked, "That's all?" "Yes." Roland put away the contract and said, "I've learned about your situation from Wendy, so even if you sign the contract, you don't have to live in the castle. You just need to come here every day to practice your ability and attend classes. Wendy should have told you about the characteristics of magic power these days, right?" "Yes, Your Highness." Hearing that she did not have to stay in the castle, Summer immediately relaxed and said, "Lady Wendy said that if I don't release the magic power I've accumulated every day, my life will be in danger on the day of awakening." "Yes, so you have to practice well. I think she'll slowly teach you the relationship between the precise control of magic power and the corresponding ability." Roland did not correct her honorifics. It was not a bad thing for a beginner to be respectful. "If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask any member of the Witch Union." "I understand, Your Highness." She lowered her head and said, "But, is this ability useless? I once asked Lady Wendy this question, but she said only Your Highness knows the answer." "Of course not." Roland smiled and said, "Your ability is only possessed by a famous detective. It's invincible when it comes to fighting crime." "Famous detective?" Summer was confused. Chapter 473. Genius in a Second to Remember Love. The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. In the evening, Philin and Eltek were sitting in the study, reading a new educational textbook. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. "Dear, I'm baking bread." "Go and open the door," Irene shouted. "Maybe it's Miss May." "Got it." He closed the book, went to the door of the living room, and opened the latch. The person standing outside was completely unexpected. "Father. Why are you here?" Philin was surprised. "I came with His Highness." The old sir patted the snow on his shoulder. "I arrived in Border Town yesterday. Although I told them that my son lives here, they still arranged a residence for me in the community near the castle. Come in, it's cold outside." Philin quickly stepped aside. Well, Sir could not help but be surprised as soon as he stepped into the house. "You also have heating here?" "You know about heating?" "I didn't know until today. Last time, I thought it was too warm in the castle. I thought His Highness was talking about a new type of fireplace. This time, when I visited the city hall, I found that the house was as warm without an open fire. Only then did I realize that this thing actually relies on steam to generate heat." He took off his coat and hung it on the stand next to the door. "Wait. I remember you didn't know what it was when you went to the castle last time. I learned about it through the notice in the city hall." Philin poured a cup of tea for his father. Before they do something, they always tell the townspeople some time in advance. Now the notice area in the square is even more popular than the convenience market. That is to say, in just 2 months, His Highness installed this thing in the homes of ordinary residents. Sir smacked his lips. "In this way, I'm afraid it will cost thousands of golden dragon. Our community is one of the first to be installed. The west and north sides are still in the process of digging trenches. And it is said that the water supply and heating are only part of the 3 supplies project. When the project is completed, we can live at night like during the day." "Live at night like the day?" Sir raised his eyebrows. "Do you mean light more candles or oil lamps?" "Neither. The people from City Hall said that they would send lightning to everyone's home." "Thunder, lightning?" the old man said in a daze. "I also think it's incredible, but that's what His Highness said in the propaganda." Philin nodded. "With electricity, the town can be as bright at night as during the day. The strange thing was that although the news sounded ridiculous, he felt that if it was Prince Roland's words, it might not be impossible. After all, he was always creating new miracles. Sir Eltec, hello. Irene ran out of the kitchen. In a panic, she was still holding a half-baked bread skewer. When she bowed, she almost dropped the bread on the floor. Sir chuckled, "Hello, Miss Irene. Actually, you don't have to rush. I'm not hungry yet." Philin saw his wife's cheeks instantly turn red. Ahem, he cleared his throat. "Today, 2 more dishes will do. Take your time, there's still a lot of time in the evening." After dinner, Irene finally recovered from her initial nervousness. The three chatted for a while, and then she began to clean up the tableware and table. His father took him to the study. Philin realized that he had something important to tell him. Sure enough, after Sir sat down at the desk, he calmly asked, "Do you know what happened in Longsong Stronghold these days?" "I know a little." Philin organized his words and said, "I heard that there was a rebellion in the 4 families. His Highness left Longsong Stronghold to quell the rebellion. It was publicized on the bulletin board. City Hall even said such things." Sir was startled, and then he gave a general account of what had happened. "Although I also sent someone to pass on the news to His Highness, I didn't expect him to come so quickly. You should be able to guess the result. The 4 great families couldn't even withstand a single blow from His Highness's troops. The Maple Leaf family, the Wolf family, and the Wild Rose family were completely annihilated, leaving behind only the Dying Elk family." "What?" Philin was greatly surprised. "Father, could it be that you—" "Of course it wasn't me," the old man sighed. "I'm already old, and I don't want to get involved in such dangerous things. But your brother is different. He is eager to get more achievements than you, to prove his excellence as an heir. Unfortunately, he is standing in the wrong position." "You mean, Miso participated in the rebellion?" Philin's face sank. Sir nodded. "After the rebellion was defeated, he was captured alive by His Highness's soldiers. On the day of the trial, I went to the square to see him for the last time." Philin closed his eyes. Although he had become a household name, the celebrity knight, and Miso had been targeting him everywhere, he was still his brother after all, and it still made him feel quite uncomfortable that he had ended up in such a situation. Because his hands were not stained with blood, and because he surrendered actively, he was sentenced to 10 years of labor. Now he should be in the North Slope mine. The latter half of his father's words made him instantly come back to his senses. 10 years of labor. I thought His Highness had executed. Sir shook his head. "When I said for the last time, I meant the last time I saw him as the head of the family. From that moment on, he was no longer a member of the Eltec family." "You severed all ties with him?" "That's right." Sir took a deep breath. "I warned him a long time ago, but he never took it to heart. This kind of person, who treats the future of the family as a child's game and gambles with the fate of all his family members, is not a suitable candidate to inherit the family." Although he spoke resolutely, there was obvious sadness in his eyes, and the wrinkles on his forehead deepened. "Now, you're my only child." "Father." Philin felt a little sore in his eyes, and he involuntarily held the old man's hand. "I've never begged for anything, but this time, I hope you can inherit the Eltec family." "I have a hunch that it will prosper in your hands," Sir said slowly. "This time, I agreed to come with His Highness to occupy a good position in the future reform. But the position can't be inherited, Father, the title will also become an honorary title." "I know, but you've neglected the role of connections and experience. His Highness said that the position should be taken by outstanding people. With the experience of predecessors and the connections that have been developed, your chances of obtaining the same position are far higher than ordinary people." He patted the back of his son's hand. "Even if you still want to be a teacher, I won't force you, as long as you can pass on the family name." After a long silence, Philin finally nodded and said, I understand, father. I promise you. In this way, I can also rest assured. Sir Eltec smiled. By the way, if you can choose, which part of the work do you want to participate in? This, how about the Second Army? I heard from the Commander-in-Chief, Iron Axe, that in addition to soldiers fighting on the battlefield, the army seems to need to set up a planning department, and this plan will first be tested in the Second Army. Sir looked at Philin with great interest. In fact, I know that this current work is not what you like the most. If you really like to deal with books, you wouldn't have chosen to become a knight. His father's eyes shone, as if he could see through his inner thoughts. You're still the same morning light, my child. To be continued. Chapter 474. Clothes, shoes, mugs, spoons, forks. May counted with her fingers. Is there anything else we need to bring? The floor was littered with daily necessities, ranging from large water bottles to small wooden bowls. The bedding is the most important thing, Irene said thoughtfully. It's best to bring a set of pillows, bedding, and sheets. Hearing this, Rosia and Gate smiled strangely at the same time, but a cold glance from May immediately made them expressionless. We don't need any of those things. Carter said he'll buy a new set in the market. It's said to be the treasures of the 4 great families, found in the basement of their mansions. Wow, they must be made of the best silk, Irene said enviously. I heard that there's a tailor shop in King's City that sells clothes and fabrics made of pure silk. Only the great nobles and rich merchants can afford it. If it's the collections of the 4 great families, it must be about the same. Well, something like that. May pretended to be indifferent. He seemed to have said that a set needs 5 golden dragon. Hiss. The 3 of them gasped. 5 golden dragon. My God, Rosia said in astonishment. That's almost equivalent to 2 years of my salary. Can you compare to the star of the Western region? Gate knocked her on the head. Miss May is a celebrity who has performed in King's City. As for Sir Carter, he's His Royal Highness Chief Knight. No matter how you look at it, we can't reach him. That's great, Sister May. Irene's eyes sparkled. I really envy you. May knew that only her envy was pure. From the beginning, it was this transparent feeling that attracted the light of Dawn's gaze. She also found it strange that a girl who grew up in the theater could develop such a character. Although she had already let go of this relationship, she still felt a little happy when she saw Irene's sincere envy. When you become famous, you can buy it for yourself. If you perform in the capital, your salary will be several golden dragon coins, not to mention the rewards from the nobles after the performance. But I don't know how long it will take for my acting skills to reach your level, Irene said, curling her lips. Looks like the house is very lively. Are you guys rehearsing? The door was suddenly pushed open, and a handsome man appeared at the door. Did I come at the wrong time? Master. Master Carter. Gate and Rosia immediately bowed. Greetings, Lord Knight. Irene tilted her head and smiled. We were discussing what supplies Sister May should bring to your residence. We were just talking about you. Really? What did you say about me? Carter asked curiously, scratching the back of his head. Nothing at all. May glared at him. This guy was always like this. It was fine when he did not speak, but once he did, he would destroy her perfect temperament of a superior. Why did you suddenly come here? It's not a holiday today, is it? Don't worry. I got special permission from His Royal Highness, and I brought a gift. A gift? May glanced at everyone, and Gate immediately understood. Ah, Miss May, I just remembered that I have something to do. When you decide on your luggage, you can call me at any time. Me too. Some clothes have been left in the bucket for a few days. Rosia also bowed and left. When she left, she also took Irene with her. Huh. I'm fine. Wait. I want to see Sister May's gift. As the voices faded away, May exhaled, locked the door, and turned to Chief Knight. What gift? Is it another new thing developed by His Royal Highness? Carter looked around and asked, Your father. He's working. Do you think everyone is as free as you? May said grumpily. After fetching his father from the fortress, he thought that it would take a long time for him to familiarize himself with the new living environment. Little did he expect that in just a week, he would find a job at the city hall sorting out documents. He couldn't even stop him. Now, he was an official clerk in the Ministry of Construction. I'm also very busy. Carter spread out his hands. A capable man in the Ministry of Justice was transferred to Longsong's stronghold by His Royal Highness. Now, all the things in Border Town fall on my head. Not only do I have to interrogate spies and check the population, but I also have to catch potential criminals. I'm so busy that I almost don't have time for 3 meals a day. You don't know, some criminals are very cruel. They're not natives of the western region, but bandits who have mixed in with the refugees. Now that life is a little better, they can't help but attack other refugees. But don't worry, these people are basically only active in the temporary residential area in the west. They won't easily enter the inner city, and once they commit a crime, they won't be able to escape my pursuit. May could not help but laugh when she saw Carter's explanation. Well, I got it. So, Sir Knight, who maintains order and peace in Border Town, would you like to have lunch here and have a glass of wine before you leave? Although I'd like to, I'm afraid I don't have enough time. Carter put down the package in his hands. Try this dress on and see if it fits. I specially asked His Royal Highness to design it. His Royal Highness? May was slightly stunned. Yes, when I reported our wedding date to His Royal Highness, he mentioned that there's a dress that's particularly suitable for the wedding, but it's very troublesome to make. I begged His Royal Highness for a long time and even bribed Miss Soroya with ice cream bread to make it. As the cloth was removed layer by layer, a touch of pure white was reflected in May's eyes. When the knight spread the dress in front of him, she suddenly felt her heart tremble. It was a simple and gorgeous dress, simple, because it was not inlaid with any jewels or gold, and was completely made up of layers of white gauze, gorgeous, because its lines were extremely exaggerated. The tight waist and the open skirt below formed a strong contrast, and the layers and layers of wavy stripes on the skirt reflected the craftsmanship to the extreme. The upper part of the dress still showed the outline of a banquet evening dress, but with the addition of the gorgeous skirt, she could imagine that any woman, whether they were nobles or not, would immediately be fascinated by this dress. May gently took the snow-white dress, which was as light as fine gauze, and turned back to the bedroom to put it on. When she returned to the living room again, Carter's eyes widened. Oh my God, you are so beautiful. Really? A rare blush appeared on her face. Even without a mirror, she could guess how she looked at the moment. The stunned Chief Knight was the best proof. May walked to Carter's side and gently kissed him on the cheek. Thank you for your gift, I like it very much. The knight, who came back to his senses, did not answer, but stretched out his arms and pulled her into his embrace. Looking at his face that was gradually approaching, May closed her eyes. Chapter 475. After 2 weeks of study and exploration, at the end of the first month of spring of the new year, City Hall Director Barav, at the request of His Royal Highness, held the first City Hall General Conference in the Castle Reception Hall. In addition to the heads of the departments of the first General Conference, this conference also included some nobles of Stronghold, and the number of participants reached 65. The learning process itself was a test. After Barav took charge of the city hall for a year, it was easy for him to distinguish which nobles were suitable for this kind of work and which nobles were not worth training. Therefore, nearly half of the nobles were excluded from this test. According to His Royal Highness, he had given these small nobles a chance to catch the express train. Since they missed it, there was nothing they could do about it. those who could not keep up with the times would only be eliminated. Bhairav felt the same way. Whether His Royal Highness was a demon or a god, his territory had shown a completely different atmosphere from the rest of the kingdom. If this was the new era, he was happy to go with His Royal Highness. The main content of today's meeting was to make a final vote on the unified laws after the city was built, and at the same time, let the nobles of Stronghold know the contents of the laws in advance. Bhairav had been preparing for this for a long time, and now it was finally time to unveil the curtain. In front of everyone was a thin hardcover book with a string of golden characters printed on the cover, the basic law of the kingdom. This was also the core law drafted by His Royal Highness himself and embellished. Just from the name, it was obvious that His Royal Highness had a big plan, and he also believed that His Royal Highness's power should not only be effective in the western region. Let's begin. His Royal Highness Roland, who was sitting at the head of the long table, nodded. Yes. Bhairav cleared his throat. I think everyone in the city hall already knows that a new city is about to be built in the western region. The law in front of you is the general law that will be implemented in His Royal Highness's territory after the construction. You can read it yourself or listen to my presentation. If you have any questions, you can ask His Royal Highness on the spot. There was a rustling sound of the book being turned. He also opened the thick cover, revealing the first page written on fine parchment. The first content you will see is the general outline, which mentions the structure and system of the new territory. The first rule, all the territories under the rule of Roland Wimbledon belong to Roland Wimbledon. Second, the city hall is the highest authority in the territory. Under the leadership of Roland Wimbledon, it handles all matters related to the governance of the territory. Thirdly, the population of the territory can be promoted to an official citizen through many ways. City Hall should maintain at least 3 promotion methods. Rule 4. After becoming an official citizen, there will no longer be the distinction of free people, farm laborers, servants, and slaves. There will also be no distinction between men and women. The citizens were protected by the law and had all the security and benefits of the territory. They also had the obligation to pay taxes, serve in the army, and defend against the enemy. Rule 5. Nobles are also official citizens. Their titles of nobility no longer have the corresponding power, but they can be inherited as an honorary title. Article 6. Roland Wimbledon shall protect the personal safety and legal property of citizens and shall not infringe upon them. Article 7. Citizens shall have the right to education, the right to choose their jobs, and the right to marry. Article 8. The territory encourages lawful commercial conduct and free trade. The 9th rule. Bhairav stroked the pages of the book and read down one by one. The laws made by the nobles rarely involved the people. Even the free people in the city, in the eyes of the great nobles, were just objects to be exploited and conscripted. It was rare for His Royal Highness to repeatedly mention the people under his rule in the system. Perhaps he really believed that only by relying on the power of the people could they fight against the coming Doomsday War. Bhairav did not care whether His Royal Highness relied on the nobles or the people. He only wanted to do as much as possible to complete the tasks given by His Royal Highness so that he could hold the power tightly in his hands. When he was in King's City, he was transferred from the Astrologer Association to the Minister of Finance as an assistant. He thought that he would soon be able to set foot on the top of the Grey Castle Kingdom. He did not expect that he would have to wait for more than 10 years. His excited mood gradually became numb and desolate. The reason why he agreed to the request of Wimbledon III to follow Prince Roland to Border Town, in addition to an illusory promise, was also because of his feelings of hopelessness. But he did not expect that today he would realize his expectations in another way. Bhairav had never seen a real demon, but he knew the strength of the armored knight. His Royal Highness could easily deal with them, so naturally, he could also wipe out the resistance forces of the whole kingdom. Sooner or later, His Royal Highness would be crowned king and rule the world, and he would also become the hand of the king with great power. At that time, if the Minister of Finance was still alive, what kind of expression would he have when he met him? Since most of the contents of the general outline had been publicized to the people in a relatively common way, the heads of the departments were not surprised. Only when it mentioned the prohibition of human trafficking and the abolition of slavery, which aroused the nobles who were listening to it, did not even raise any questions about the other provisions. As for the part about the reform of the nobles, these small nobles usually did not enjoy much of the benefits of the territory. Most of their territories were in desolate and uninhabited places, so naturally they did not care too much about the so-called enfeoffment and legal rights. In addition to the nearly 2 weeks of study, many nobles had already planned to sell their territory to City Hall, and then use the money to open a new mechanical processing plant or chemical plant in Longsong's stronghold. In this way, the expanded meeting continued from morning to afternoon, and in the middle of the banquet, the servants directly brought the food to the table, and everyone ate while reading. Barev's water cup was changed several times. Although his throat was sore, he still enjoyed it. Finally, the meeting entered the last topic, which was also the only provision in the basic law of the kingdom that everyone had to discuss and decide, to determine the flag and name of the new city. The voices of everyone instantly became noisy. So Barev first asked everyone to make a name and the ideal image in their hearts, and then put them on the table for the participants to evaluate and decide the final answer. After several votes and eliminations, the flag and name of the new city were finally selected. The former was based on the emblem of the royal family of Greycastle, and the image at the bottom was still a tower and a spear. Above the tower was a pentagonal star, and below the tower were 3 small stars. The big star represented Lord Roland Wimbledon, and the small stars represented City Hall, the First Army, and the Witch Union. Chapter 476. 2 days after the general meeting, Iron Axe once again received the order to test a new weapon. Since the northwest side could be attacked by demonic beasts at any time, the new shooting range was set across the Redwater River. When Iron Axe arrived, the prince's guards had already surrounded the open space with hemp ropes and red flags, and set up sentry posts at both ends of the steel bridge to prohibit unauthorized personnel from passing through. Obviously, His Highness attached great importance to this weapon test. Iron Axe walked quickly in the snow of different depths. Looking at the friendly eyes of the guards, he could not help but think of the scene when he participated in the first gun test. At that time, he was just an unknown alien from the Sand Nation, and the people of Greycastle always looked at him with suspicion and vigilance. Even though he had lived in the town for 5 years and impressed the hunters with his superb archery, no one would look at him outside the old district. He originally thought that he would live in seclusion in this barren land as a hunter, and either die of old age in bed, or die under the claws of demonic beasts or prey. He did not expect that His Highness, as a Sand Nation, would take a fancy to him and let him see the power of skyfire and thunder. The following changes were too fast for him to follow. From the establishment of the militia to fighting against demonic beasts to the establishment of the First Army in Border Town, he became the commander-in-chief of the First Army from the captain of the hunter team. What was even more surprising was that because of His Highness' attitude towards witches, he once again met the heir of the Osha clan, Lady Drow Silvermoon, in Border Town, which made up for the biggest regret of his life. For this trust and appreciation, as well as the compensation for his fate, Iron Axe had long vowed to dedicate everything to his new master. Approaching the center of the testing ground, Iron Axe saw His Highness Roland. To his slight surprise, in addition to His Highness and the Chief Knight, there were also several sleeping island witches. "Your Highness," Iron Axe reporting for duty. He stepped forward and saluted the prince. The latter nodded and said, "Now that everyone is here, we can start." He handed the 2 spears to Iron Axe and Carter. "This is one of my newly developed weapons. It's still in the prototype stage, and the quantity is limited. Let's take turns to try it." Iron Axe carefully looked at the new gun in his hand. It looked very similar to a revolving rifle. The only difference was that the new gun did not have a cartridge. He was stunned. Could it be that this gun was like the earliest flintlock that needed to be loaded from the front of the barrel? "It's called a bolt rifle," His Royal Highness quickly explained. "The bullets use the latest smokeless double-base propellant, and the caliber is 8 mm. Although it's smaller than the 10mm revolving rifle, it's more powerful. He flipped the gun over. The ammunition is inserted from the front of the trigger, and each clip can insert 5 bullets. However, it can't be fired continuously like a revolving rifle. It needs to be manually unloaded and loaded. According to His Royal Highness demonstration, Iron Axe quickly understood how to operate the new rifle, and raised it to test firing a clip of bullets. The new gun was quite powerful. Every time he pulled the trigger, he could feel the impact of the butt on his shoulder, and the sound was much louder than that of a revolving rifle. After firing 5 shots, he noticed that there was almost no smoke in front of the muzzle. If it was an old rifle, the smoke from 5 bullets would be enough to completely obscure his sight. This was probably the credit of His Highness's so-called smokeless ammunition. However, there was nothing special about the gun itself. Compared to the huge gap between the revolver and the flintlock, not to mention that the new rifle was no progress, Iron Axe even felt that it was inferior to the revolver. The most obvious difference was that the firing speed had become slower. Compared with the former, which could be fired continuously after aiming, the new gun was extremely inconvenient to shoot standing up. After manually loading the bullets, he had to raise the gun and aim again. Although the process was much faster than that of the flintlock, he needed to suppress the enemy in a short time. For example, when he was cleaning up the rebellious nobles in Longsong stronghold, the new rifle was far less useful than the revolving rifle. After Iron Axe told Carter about his experience in the test, Carter expressed the same opinion. The prince nodded. Indeed, it's not as convenient as the revolving rifle, but its advantages are also very obvious. Andrea, you demonstrate. He handed a rifle to the witch. Remember to shoot with your ability. Aha! The blonde witch took the gun and skillfully pulled the bolt and loaded it. It was obvious that this was not the first time she had touched this weapon. Watch carefully. With 3 deafening gunshots, Iron Axe was surprised to find that the 3 farthest wooden targets had fallen one after another. The bullets not only hit the fingernail-sized targets, but also hit the pole below the targets. After all, they were at least 400 meters away from the target. Your Highness, this is... Carter said in disbelief. Andrea's derivative ability allows her to accurately hit the target, whether the weapon in her hand is a bow or a gun, the prince said with a smile. But it doesn't directly affect the bolts or bullets. Instead, it depends on the accurate control of the weapon's performance. In other words, if you throw a stone yourself, you can probably hit a target about 10 meters away. If you throw a bird, it's very likely that you won't hit anything. You mean? Ordinary people can also reach this level after training? Yes, this is the biggest advantage of the bolt rifle. It won't leak due to the gap between the cartridge and the barrel, which greatly improves the range and accuracy. Roland nodded. When equipped with a scope, even an ordinary soldier can accurately kill an enemy about 400 to 500 meters away. However, the accurate shooting range of a revolver is less than 100 meters. Iron Axe suddenly understood the horror of this weapon. Most people would not be on guard against a sneak attack at this distance. As long as they hid in residential houses or high ground, they could easily kill important targets. If it was Lady Nightingale holding it, almost no one would be able to defend against a bullet shot from a corner. Your Highness, you promised to give me one when you mass-produce it, Andrea said, covering her mouth. Of course. Roland put away the 2 rifles, walked to the other side, and uncovered a bulging piece of cloth. In fact, the bolt rifle is just an appetizer before the test. This thing is the focus of today's test. Chapter 477. This is a heavy machine gun, and it uses the same bullets as a bolt rifle. As long as you pull the bullets out of the cloth belt, you can fire them with the new rifle. The prince patted the thick firearm. As for its mechanism, it's much more complicated than a rifle. You won't understand it even if I explain it to you, so I won't explain it here. I call it the Mark I type heavy machine gun, and I'll demonstrate it myself. When he sat behind the firearm and pressed the trigger, Iron Axe could hardly believe his eyes. The muzzle of the gun suddenly emitted a continuous stream of sparks, and the air it spewed out shook up the fluffy snow. The bullets seemed to be pulled by something, rushing towards the body of the gun one after another. On the other side, the hot bullet casings quickly ejected one after another, and in the blink of an eye, dozens of them fell to the ground. Obviously, there was only one firearm shooting in front of him, but the momentum was even more amazing than a small team of flintlocks. The gunshots were so continuous that there was no gap between them at all. The prince did not aim at the distant target, but at the snow not far in front of him. The densely packed bullets brought up snow pillars, and the whole ground seemed to be boiling. Before a snow pillar fell to the ground, another snow pillar had already flown up, as if the bullets had interweaved into a death net in that area, and anyone who tried to pass through would be smashed to pieces. "This is too amazing," the chief knight murmured. Not only Carter, but Iron Axe also glanced at the other witches out of the corner of his eye. Except for Lady Nightingale, who had been guarding Roland, her expression did not change much. The rest of the witches were all stunned. The black-haired woman, Ashes, who carried a giant sword, had a more complicated expression, including shock, confusion, and loss. Iron Axe could not help but empathize with her. The reason he could become the chief guard of the Osha clan was because of the archery and swordsmanship he had practiced since he was a child. And those warriors with outstanding talent, who had been undefeated for a long time in the clan fights, were the targets that the chiefs fought to win over. But no matter how sharp one's reflexes were and how agile one's movements were, it was impossible to avoid an invisible bullet. Even the disadvantage of needing to reload a gun was no longer an issue in front of the mark eye. It was conceivable that if the First Army could be equipped with 10 to 20 heavy machine guns, the killing techniques that the enemy had painstakingly practiced for more than 10 years would become a joke. This must not be a good feeling. Fortunately, he had found a new way. Leaf quickly passed through the branches, driving the demonic beasts that broke into the misty forest toward the direction of the city wall. Now the area under her control was almost the size of the town, and these plants were equivalent to her eyes and limbs. Not only could they grow according to her will, but they could also build a line of defense against outsiders. But His Highness repeatedly stressed that she did not need to deal with the enemies. If they encountered a powerful demonic beast or a demon, they could just inform the town garrison. Especially the latter, if they were discovered and the demons destroyed the entire forest, the loss would be even greater. In the future, they would have to rely on her to provide early warning, and the forest supplies that could be adjusted according to the needs were also a great asset. For this reason, Leaf opened up an open space near the town, intending to start planting a new batch of Golden Ones wheat after the end of the months of demons. This time, with the heart of the forest providing her with magic power, the wheat used for seeds could grow almost continuously, and it would not be a problem to supply it to all the farmers in the western region. At this moment, she sensed a group of wolf hybrids entering the edge of the forest. Leaf immediately looked at this group of intruders, only to see 8 strong demonic beasts fleeing into the depths of the forest. Just as she was about to use the flying messenger to inform the First Army and drive them back to the city wall, she suddenly noticed something wrong. They had completely lost their former ferocity, as if they were being driven by something, fleeing in a panic. The branches and vines that stretched out one after another could not stop them from running. Could it be, the demons are here again? Leaf frowned. Just as she was about to expand her scanning range, she felt a trace of warmth above her head. She raised her head abruptly and saw a few cracks in the cloudy sky, from which a golden luster drilled out and sprinkled on the white land of the western region. What should we do with this place? Tilly pointed to an equation in the book. Well, we should substitute formula 4 here to form a new equation, and then derive it to get the formula in the book. Anna quickly wrote down the derivation process on a piece of toilet paper. That's about it. I see. Tilly clapped her hands and said, if we take this variable, the result should be close to 1. You're amazing to be able to calculate this result in your mind, Anna exclaimed. Hee hee, Princess Tilly smiled embarrassedly. This is my ability. You're the one who's really amazing to be able to learn the new textbook he wrote so quickly. Anna revealed a soft smile, a smile that would only appear when she mentioned Roland Wimbledon. Every time this happened, Tilly couldn't help but sigh in her heart. Regardless of whether Roland was the previous fourth prince or not, to be able to make the simple and kind Anna like him so much, he couldn't possibly be an evil person. In fact, the more he spent time with Roland, the more he felt his unique charm. Roland was so different that he was like a visitor from outer space. He was incompatible with all the nobles in this world, but inexplicably reassuring. Looking at the gray sky outside the window, Tilly sometimes could not help but think that it would be great if the months of demons could last forever. When she learned all of his knowledge, even if Roland did not say anything, she would be able to really understand him, right? She shook her head and gathered her thoughts. Just as she was about to ask the next question, the page that her finger was pointing at suddenly became bright. The two of them looked out of the window at the same time and saw that the sky, which was previously covered with scattered snowflakes, was now emitting rays of light, and the long-lost sunshine was gilding the clouds. And the busy people in the town also noticed this change, and soon more and more people poured into the streets, and people began to cheer. Tilly stared at the sky in a daze, with mixed feelings. The gunshots stopped, and at the feet of His Highness, there was a pile of shell casings, and the gun barrel was emitting bursts of white smoke, and the front of the gun was even a touch of dark red. The scene was silent, and no one expressed their opinion, nor did they need to. From everyone's expression, one could see the shock brought by this new weapon. Iron Axe could no longer hold back his excitement, and knelt down in the manner of the Sand Nation. "This world is yours, Your Highness." This was the new path he had found, to follow behind His Highness Roland, lead the first army equipped with new firearms, and expand the territory for him. One of his hands reached out to Iron Axe. After helping him up, His Highness was not as complacent as Iron Axe had imagined. Instead, he looked in the direction of the impassable mountain range and said in a low voice, "But our real enemy is the devil. Even so, I will fight for you to the end." Before Iron Axe could finish his words, a dazzling light suddenly cut through the sky and fell to the ground. The witches behind him exclaimed, and Roland also looked up, revealing a smile. The light became more and more intense, and soon it became too bright to look at directly. The dark clouds quietly dissipated like snow in the face of a raging fire, and the sun once again appeared in front of everyone. Chapter 478. Before the sun rose, Kakuzum's door was being pounded loudly. He yawned and subconsciously reached for his coat. Halfway through, he remembered that the first thing he did when he got up was not to put on his coat. The thick brick walls kept the chill out, and the incredible heater kept the room warm. No matter how heavy the snow outside was, the room would not leak water from the ceiling like before. Such a high-quality house was something that only the nobles in Valencia could enjoy. Of course, it was a little small. He opened the door and saw his assistant, Barracuda, standing outside. "Why haven't you gotten up yet?" "We have to hurry, Captain. If we're late, we won't be able to get a good seat." "Do we have to be so early?" Kakuzum looked at the sky. The first rays of dawn had just peeked through the clouds, and the soft morning light illuminated a small corner of the sky. "Of course. I heard from the neighbor next door that there will be a play by the Star Flower Troupe during the Victory Day celebration. If we're late, I'm afraid we won't even be able to enter the square." "All right, wait for me." The old man shrugged and went back to his bedroom to change his clothes. Looking at the empty bed, he sighed softly. Victory Day. I wonder if Longsong's stronghold has such a celebration. Otherwise, Vader would have missed it. The two walked out of the door and toward the square. Ropes were tied to the tree trunks on both sides of the street, and the ropes were hung with colorful flags. Coupled with the morning light, the whole atmosphere of the town changed. From time to time, people would enter the main road from a side road and walk side by side with them. It seemed that they were also going to the square. Kakuzim had heard about the victory celebration from Barracuda. In order to celebrate the safe passage of the months of demons, His Highness named the first day after the end of the months of demons as Victory Day. On this day, not only would the town have a holiday, but there would also be a grand bonfire banquet in the central square. When his assistant heard the news, he excitedly came to invite him to watch the banquet. After thinking about it, the old man thought that since he had nothing to do, so he agreed. They walked to the square area. The central area had already been divided into an open space with wooden fences around the stage. Policemen in black uniforms were maintaining order. Many people had arrived earlier than them and surrounded the open space with 3 or 4 layers. The two of them quickly found a place near the stage and chatted while waiting for the celebration to begin. When the sun rose above their heads, the square was already crowded with people, and the prince appeared in the center of the stage. As soon as he appeared, Kakuzim heard overwhelming cheers. The people around him raised their hands excitedly and shouted, "Long live His Highness!" Prince Roland smiled and waited for the cheers of the people to die down. He raised his fist and said loudly, "Once again, we have defeated evil." This time, the sky above the square exploded, and the deafening response caused the old man's heart to tremble. It had been a long time since he had seen a lord who was so well received by the people. "My people, no matter where you come from, be it the western region, the northern region, the eastern region or the southernmost corner, as long as you contribute to this place, this glory belongs to you. It belongs to everyone who has shed their sweat and blood for Border Town." The prince's calm and emotional voice seemed to have magic power. He was not shouting, but his words were clearly heard by Kakuzim. "And today's Victory Day is a day designed for all of you. Evil has not been completely eliminated, and it will come back sooner or later. But no matter how many times the enemy comes, as long as we unite and work together, victory will eventually belong to us." The old man had never heard a royal family member call himself "we," along with the commoners, but His Highness did not seem to care at all. He looked at the people so naturally, without the usual arrogance and disdain common to nobles. It seemed that in the prince's eyes, all the people were one with him. Incredible, but surprisingly, harmonious. "Now, let us cheer to our heart's content and raise our glasses to celebrate this hard-won victory. Long live His Highness! Long live victory!" Cheers rang through the square. Everyone raised their right hands to show their respect to His Highness, including Kakuzim. "This is the lord I should be loyal to," Barracuda said excitedly, patting his chest. Next, it was the Star Flower Troop's turn to perform. Many people whistled excitedly. "I haven't seen their performance for a long time. Lady Irene is still so beautiful. But compared to May, she lacks a certain charm. It's time to call her Lady May. Don't you know that she's going to marry Knight Shi? Even His Highness has sent her a gift." Hearing the discussions around him, Barracuda could not help but ask curiously, "The troop's name is either the same as the theater or the same as the place. Why does the troop in Border Town have such a strange name?" "You're not from the western region, are you?" someone immediately explained. "Lady May and Lady Irene are both from the Longsong Theater. One is called the Star of the Western Region, and the other is called the Flower of Tomorrow. Now that they're in Border Town, of course they're called the Star Flower Troop. Look, it's starting." This was not Kakuzim's first time watching a play, but the content of the story was particularly novel. It was not about the love between nobles, but an interpretation of the history of the Western region. The actors on the stage played several ordinary people living in Border Town. They were helpless and hesitant in the face of the months of demons and were herded like lambs. Then they made up their minds to stay in Border Town and fight the brutal demonic beasts to the end. The whole story was full of twists and turns, but it was exciting. When the characters died of hunger and cold, or died protecting their loved ones on the line of defense, the audience felt the same way. The old man quickly devoted himself to the play. Even the refugees who had just arrived in the western region could feel the sacrifices and unremitting efforts of the people of Border Town. When the play came to an end with the day of victory, the square was filled with thunderous applause. What happened next stunned Kikuzim. He saw a woman with long flaxen hair cut the wooden platform into pieces with a black thread. She then used the pieces of wood to start a bonfire that soared into the sky. Not only were the onlookers not afraid, but they even shouted her name. Miss Anna. Miss Anna. As the whole sheep were roasted on the bonfire, the atmosphere reached its peak. The local people walked into the square in a strange dance, beginning the last part of the celebration. As long as the dance did not stop, the barbecue would continue until midnight. Captain, shall we go too? Barracuda swallowed and was eager to try. I'm old and can't dance anymore. Kikuzim shook his head. You go with them. Then. I'll go first. He stuck out his tongue. I'll bring you some barbecue when I get it. Watching the young man follow the crowd to the open space, the old man could not help but laugh. He had been hesitating about what name he should give his stone boat, which would be memorable and not cliché. Now he finally had an idea. Chapter 479. Just like a year ago, the feast in the castle belonged to the witches. Leaf turned the backyard, which had been expanded several times, into an open-air camp surrounded by olive trees. Around the blazing bonfire, everyone could see the bright stars in the night sky when they looked up. Compared with the last barbecue with only 5 witches, this one was much livelier. Not only were all the witches from the Witch Cooperation Association present, but also Maggie, Lucia, Agatha, Spear, Paper, and Summer. Together with the 7 witches from Sleeping Island, the total number of witches was 25. Plates of cut food and sauce were placed on the small table next to the bonfire for everyone to take. After clearing out the rebellious nobles' territory, the amount of meat and cloth in the warehouse had increased a lot. In addition, Evelyn's specially brewed low-alcohol fruit wine and Agatha's ice cream were also served on the table. While Lightning was enthusiastically demonstrating how to roast a chicken leg for the first time, Maggie had already stuffed the sizzling steak into her mouth. After following the little girl for a year in the mountains and forests, she could roast any food that could be eaten with ease. Like Maggie, her waist pocket was also stuffed with all kinds of seasonings. I think it's a waste of time. Agatha smeared honey on the cooked beef meatball in her hand. The demons are coming. Instead of seizing the time to prepare for the battle, we're enjoying a temporary victory here. When the enemies break through the city. Gulp, everything will be over. Take your time. It's okay. Roland handed her a new string of wrapped beef meatballs. It was obvious that she liked this kind of meatball with gravy. It's more efficient to strike a balance between work and rest. Defeating the demons is not a matter of a day's leisure. Even if we fail, at least we can enjoy the beauty of life. Preposterous. Agatha rolled her eyes at him and took the meatball. After rolling it in a bowl of oil, she put it directly into the bonfire. With the protection of the frost ability, she could maintain the surface of the meatball at just the right temperature no matter how the fire roasted it. It could be seen that the cooling and nitrogen-making work had improved her control of magic power. On the other side, Summer, who had just joined the alliance, had never seen so much meat. Although she kept swallowing her saliva, her hands were hesitant. Fortunately, Vendi noticed her hesitation and pulled the newly awakened sister to her side, sharing the food she had baked with her and Paper. On Sleeping Island, Ashes, Andrea, and Shabby were playing poker while waiting for their food to be roasted. In just a few months, the 3 of them had learned all the cards that Roland was familiar with. As long as the demonic beasts did not attack the town, Roland could always see them playing cards together in the castle hall. The other Sleeping Island witches, such as Candle, Evelyn, and Sylvie, had gotten along very well with the witches in the town. Seeing them talking happily with Leaf, Echo, Soroya, and the others, they were no different from a family. Looking at the warm scene in front of him, Roland felt quite gratified. After more than a year of hard work, the changes in the western region were emerging little by little. Whether it was the enthusiastic cheers of the people in the square during the day or the happy smiles on the witches' faces now, they were all rewards for his efforts. This kind of reward was so sweet that he could not help but be intoxicated by it. When the bonfire gradually went out, it was also approaching midnight. Roland asked Nightingale and Ashes to escort Nana and Summer home respectively, while he went to the second floor of the castle and waited for Anna to appear. He decided to take the initiative to take this step instead of passively waiting or procrastinating. The silver-white moonlight shone into the castle from the window between the corridors. With this light, he saw Anna's blue eyes. This scene seemed familiar, but their positions were reversed. Her pupils, half hidden in the darkness, reflected a faint luster, like the stars in the night sky. However, without the stars, the night sky at this time belonged to her alone. Roland did not speak, but stepped forward to take her hand and walked to the third floor. Although it was not the first time he had intimate contact with her, his heart was beating unexpectedly fast, and through the palm of his hand, he could also feel Anna's nervousness. Even so, she did not have the slightest hesitation and followed closely behind him. After returning to his bedroom and closing the door, Roland took a deep breath and turned his head. When he was hesitating about what to say, Anna had already kissed him. The soft tip of her tongue gently pried open his teeth, and the sweet breath spread between his lips and teeth, intoxicating him. Suddenly, the idea of sealing his mouth with a kiss came into his mind. When he did not know what to say, he would kiss. When he did not know how to express his feelings, he would kiss. A kiss was a silent language, a kiss was a burning emotion. When the two of them separated again, Anna's cheeks were already flushed. "I have a gift for you." Roland took out 2 red magic stones from his arms. They had been polished and inlaid with a golden edge, with a thin red string hanging from the top. "This is a sigil." "Yes, one is a pathfinding stone, and the other is a positioning stone. After combining them with magic, it will become a tracking sigil." Roland put the pathfinding stone around Anna's neck. "This way, no matter where I am, you can find me through it." Anna seemed to realize something and stared at him blankly. He gently held her cheek and asked word by word, "Will you marry me, Anna?" The blue lake instantly began to rain heavily, and it could no longer remain calm. After a long time, Anna nodded and responded, "Yes." Everything that followed was so natural. The feelings that had been brewing for a long time completely broke through the last obstacle and intertwined with each other. Roland picked her up by the waist and put her on the bed. He kissed her forehead from her forehead to her neck, and then all the way down, his fingers clumsily unbuttoning the buttons of her clothes. Anna did not close her eyes, but watched his every move, as if she wanted to deeply imprint his every appearance in her mind. When the girl's white and delicate skin was completely exposed, Roland gently pulled her into his arms and covered her with a quilt. Without the obstruction of clothes, he could clearly feel her rhythmic heartbeat, as if it was about to jump out of her chest. "This time," Anna whispered in Roland's ear. "What?" "I won't fall asleep again." Roland could not help but laugh out loud. This laughter also eased the tension between the two of them. He pinched Anna's nose. "Even if you fall asleep, I won't let you go tonight." As their lips moved closer again, the two finally became one, their mind and body fused into one. To be continued. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.